Chapter 39. The morning sun shone lazily on the sea of clouds. Just like the day before, the Jadian disciples came to the square to continue watching the Jadian Seven Peaks tournament that was held once every 60 years. The Bamboo Peak people stood under the red list from yesterday. Half of the names on the list were removed. Next to Sha Danan's name, his opponent was written, Chu Yuan. Since morning, Sha Danan's heart began to be nervous. Although he knew he was here to experience, his heart could not help but be nervous. His heart was beating fast, his mouth was dry, and he only ate 2 mouthfuls of breakfast before he lost his appetite. At this moment, he whispered to his eldest senior brother, Song Darren, "Eldest senior brother, who is this Chu Yuan? Is he powerful?" Xavion frowned, shook his head. "I don't know. Never heard of him before. The list says he is a Sunrise Peak disciple, but I don't know how strong he is." Then, Xavion looked at Sha Danan. Seeing his nervous face, he smiled. "Xiao Shidi, don't be nervous. It's not a big deal. It's my first time participating in the tournament. I'm also very nervous. I'll be fine once I get on the stage." Sha Danan murmured, "Yes." At this moment, Amandla, who was standing at the side, walked over, smiled maliciously. "Hey, Xiaongs, why don't we make a bet to see Xiao Shidi's result this time?" Okay, I bet Xiao Shidi will lose." Me too, right? I bet double. Count me in." Xavion was furious, pointed at everyone. "What are you doing? Xiao Shidi's battle is coming. You still want to attack him?" Sha Danan was very grateful, said, "De Shi Xiao." Xavion 6. Amandla stuck out his tongue. "De Shi Xiao, I was just joking. Please don't tell Master." Song Darren, "No, since you've already dealt a blow to me. I'll bet 5 on the bet you just made." Amandla, Sha Danan. At this time, Tian Bui and Suru walked over. The Bamboo Valley disciples went up to greet them. Tian Bui looked at them, said, "Yesterday you all performed well, but after entering the second round, the rest are basically the elite disciples of each house. You all must be careful." Everyone replied in unison, "Yes." Serene looked at Sha Danan, walked to him, said, "Xiao Fan, today is your first battle. Be careful, understand?" Sha Danan's heart warmed, said quietly, "Yes, Shenyang." Suru nodded and was about to say something when suddenly the bell and cauldron chimed together. The competition had officially begun. Tian Bui and Suru looked at each other, nodded, said, "Both of you know the venue of the competition. It is written clearly on that red notice. After the competition starts, me and your teacher's wife will also be watching. Don't make us lose face." Everyone responded together. Tian Bui nodded, spoke quietly with Suru, and walked away. Hidi, who came with them, looked around, then walked toward Sha Danan. Sha Danan's heart suddenly beat fast. Hidi looked at Sha Danan, suddenly laughed, turned around, and said to everyone, "Look at how nervous Xiao Fan is. Sweat is on his forehead." Everyone laughed. Xavion also laughed. I also comforted Xiao Shidi, but it doesn't seem to be of any use. Xiao Shimmy, you still need to go. Hidi spat, turned to Sha Danan, said, "Xiao Fan, I also need to compete. I can't go and cheer for you. You need to work hard, and be careful." Sha Danan looked at her beautiful face. Her breath was like smelling a light fragrance. His heart couldn't help but be excited, nodded heavily, but for some reason, he couldn't even say a word. Hidi obviously did not think too much, smiled at Sha Danan, then walked over to chat with the Shixiangs. After a moment, everyone went their separate ways. Obviously, those who were competing went to the arena. Those who were not competing went to cheer for their fellow faction members. But no one thought to be with Sha Danan. Perhaps everyone thought that this was a person who had no hope at all. Sha Danan stood there, watching the Shixiangs go far away. His heart suddenly felt unspeakable pain. He slowly walked to the red notice, carefully read it again. He and Sunrise Peak disciple Chu Yuan were arranged to compete at the furthest Jun stage. Sha Danan smiled bitterly, walked forward. On the way, countless of Jadian disciples passed by, talking and laughing. Sha Danan listened. Most of them were talking about the result of yesterday's contest. The popular contestants easily won. During that time, many people mentioned that besides Kevern, there was another young master in Dragonhead Peak. Shaw Danon heard their description and guessed that it was most likely Bay. But more people were talking about Small Bamboo Valley's Lu Sweki. This beautiful girl who owned the celestial sword, Tianya, had a high level of skills that exceeded everyone's expectations, but yesterday, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, she broke her opponent's celestial sword. It seemed to make many people very dissatisfied, but this made even more people want to watch her battle. Her popularity instead increased and not decreased. Besides, the long-lost Aeolian Firmus was even more eye-catching. Many people wanted to see this divine artifact from the righteous and evil battle thousands of years ago. Even some Jadian elders were no exception. Shaw Danon walked while listening. He couldn't help but remember the appearance of the ice beauty Anan. He shook his head. At that moment, a shout came from the front. Shao Fan. The voice was very familiar. Shaw Danon looked up and immediately laughed. Bei was walking toward him. Shaw Danon greeted him, smiled. I was wondering why I couldn't find you. So you came here? Bei pointed behind him, said, Today I still have a contest. It is at Kin's stage. Of course I have to come early to prepare. Then he looked at Shaw Danon, smiled. Today is also your turn. Which stage are you at? Shaw Danon said, I am at Jun's stage. It is about to begin. I can't go there to cheer for you. You need to be careful. Bei smiled. You too. Yeah. Why didn't your Shi Xiang and elders come to see you? Shaw Danon startled, then forced a smile. It's not like you don't know the number of people in my house is small, and there are many people competing today. Master and Shenyang are watching the Shi Xiang and Shiji's contest. Lin Jingyu glanced at him, sighed, and patted him on the shoulder. Shaw Danon cheered himself up, smiled. It is nothing. I'm just here to see it anyway. It is not a big deal, but you need to work hard. Don't let others say that people from Grass Temple Village are useless. Bei nodded heavily. Just when he was about to say something, a bell rang behind him. He looked back, said, My contest is about to begin. I can't talk to you anymore. If I can make it, I will go see you immediately. Shaw Danon nodded, said, Go quickly. Bei turned and walked away. Shaw Danon looked at his back and thought, If you can make it in time, it will be strange if I can still stand on the stage. He mocked himself in his heart and slowly walked to the Jin platform. This was the easternmost side of the Cloud Sea Square. At a glance, there were only a dozen Qingyan disciples. Most of them were from Sunrise Peak. Compared to Lu Sweki's platform in the middle, it was a world of difference. There was only one chair under the stage. An old man with white beard was sitting there. Shaw Danon looked at him and felt he was familiar. After thinking for a moment, he remembered he was the elder who scolded disciples for being lustful yesterday morning before Anan's contest. But he did not know which branch of Jadian he was from. In the Seven Peaks tournament, there were a total of 8 arenas. Under normal circumstances, the Jadian would arrange at least one elder to guard each arena. Otherwise, the young disciples would be hot-blooded, and it would be hard to control them. Shaw Danon walked to the old man with white beard, bowed, said, Sherbois, I am Bamboo Peak disciple Shaw Danon. Today I will compete on the Jun stage. The old man with white beard turned his head, peered at Shaw Danon, said casually, Oh, you are here. It is about to begin. Go on the stage. Shaw Danon answered and looked at the stage. There was no one there. It seemed the Sunrise Peak disciple called Chu Yu Wang had not arrived yet. He hesitated for a moment, but finally obeyed the white-bearded old man's words and walked up the steps to the stage. At the same time, whispers could be heard from the Morning Sun Peak disciples below the stage. It was obvious that they were discussing him. The morning sun had risen. The first light of Peak of Widows fell on him. It was a little warm. Shaw Danon stood on the stage, looking at the eastern sky. There, the sun was slowly rising. The light was soft and not dazzling. It reflected the red clouds in the sky. Shaw Danon's heart suddenly had a burst of emotion. 5 years ago, he was still an ignorant village child. He never dreamed of standing on Peak of Widows to watch the sunrise. No, it was not that he never dreamed, but he simply did not know that there would be such a beautiful sunrise in this world. In a blink of an eye, life was like a cloud. His state of mind was that of a 16-year-old youth, but at this moment, it was like the worries of a 60-year-old man. Chapter 40. He reached his hand into his bosom and touched the cold fire stick. 1 month ago, without anyone noticing, Shah Danon was surprised to find that he could barely control the black fire stick. At that moment, he could not believe his eyes. However, after he repeated it countless times in the dead of night, with his telekinesis, the fire stick was really moving. Drive. This is a thunderous phrase in Jadian's cultivation. It is the performance of pure essences Yu Qing level 4. It is what every new disciple repeat, hope, and strive for in their countless years of cultivation. Shah Danon only dared to dream that he can reach this level, to be able to fight for his master, to be able to make his master smile. But is it possible? Shah Danon tried his best to control himself and did not tell anyone about it. At the same time, he tried to use his telekinesis to drive other objects like pots and pans in the kitchen, but nothing happened. This also hit his confidence. He could not understand why such a strange situation would happen. In the middle of the night, when he woke up and stared at the strange fire stick that seemed destined to be entangled with him, he could feel a trace of coldness slowly roaming through his body. Dang! The clear bell rang, startled Shah Danon, and woke him up. He turned his head and saw that there were still more than 10 Sunrise Peak disciples below the stage. The white-bearded old man was still sitting there drowsily, but on the opposite side of the stage, a man in his 30s had appeared out of nowhere and was smiling at him. Shah Danon blushed, quickly saluted, said, "Bamboo Peak disciple Shah Danon, asked Chu Shixiao for advice." Chu Yuhong smiled, "I don't dare to. Talented people will appear in every generation. Although junior brother Zhang is young, you are still able to stand on the stage calmly without any anxiety or fear. You are much stronger than me when I was young. I admire you." Shah Danon was startled, then murmured, "To be honest, Shixiang, I was just daydreaming." The crowd burst into an uproar. The dozen or so Sunrise Peak disciples all fell down laughing. Chu Yuhong was also stunned for a moment. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then, he felt that it was inappropriate, so he said, "Junior Zhang, you must be joking. The time has come. I'll ask for your guidance now." Shah Danon's heart jumped. Feeling nervous, said slowly, "Chu Shixiao, please have mercy." Chu Yuhong smiled and didn't answer. He seemed to be very confident. His right hand trembled, and a faint yellow sword appeared in the air with a clang sound. The sword is called Xiaoyang. Zhang Shidi, please. Shah Danon took a look at the sword of Xiaoyang. The yellow light on the sword was pure and gentle. His spirit was lifted from far away. It seemed like it was not an ordinary item. He secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Unconsciously, his face became a little hot, but in the end he still reached into his bosom, grabbed the fire stick, and took it out. Everyone in the arena, including Chu Yuhong and the disciples of the Rising Sun Peak, looked at the black fire stick. Silence. Ha! It was unknown who was the first to laugh, breaking the silence. In any case, after a while, the audience burst into laughter. Someone said with great difficulty, What is that? I've already said everyone in Big Bamboo Peak is weird. You don't say yesterday that skinny guy using dices became a laughing stock. I didn't expect today there's actually someone using a fire stick, really laughing me to death. Ha ha! At this moment, even Chu Yuhong, who was on the stage, couldn't help but laugh a few times before he managed to hold it in. He said, "Junior brother Zhang, this is, it's yours." Hee, sorry, I can't control it. Ah, is this your treasure? Shah Danon heard the people around him laughing. His face turned red, unable to say a word. He knew that using this fire stick would be too unsightly and would definitely be ridiculed by others, but he just couldn't use other things. Moreover, deep in his heart, there was a tiny, faint hope that this could really prove himself. So in the end, he still brought this fire stick out. But in the end, what the fire stick brought him was the scorn and laughter of others. The people around him laughed loudly. Shah Danon lowered his head. In his eyes, there was only the black and ugly fire stick left in his hand. They laughed loudly, just like the senior brothers of the same sect before they left. Even senior sister Ling Er, whom he deeply missed, laughed along with them. He lowered his head, closed his eyes. A cold feeling seemed to be calling out from the depths of his body, slowly wandering through his body. What is the most lonely time for a person? Is it alone facing the coldness of the world? Is it alone facing all the ridicule? A person's blood, is it cold or boiling? He suddenly raised his head, looked in front of him. At this moment, the sunlight shined on his face. No one could see his expression clearly. Xiaoyang's sword in Chu Yu Wang's hand, in the midst of the laughter and cheers of the audience, shot out a light that was almost like the rising sun. Bright, glorious, righteous. Following his incantation, with a shout, the Xiaoyang celestial sword, like the brilliant sun, came pressing down in an imposing manner. A gust of hot air hit his face, but Sha Danan's heart was as cold as ice. For some reason, looking at the incoming light, at that moment, he suddenly remembered a morning long ago. He and Lin Jingyu spent a thrilling night in the wild, and when they returned to Grass Temple Village, they saw a sea of blood and mountains of corpses. In that morning, he lost all his happiness. He even felt that he was buried in that sea of blood. He struggled with all his might, delusional to find his family, but in the end, he could not do anything. The pain pierced into his heart. The heat seemed to burn his skin. In front of his eyes, that quiet night appeared. Beside the pond, a beautiful woman stood by the water, hugging her lover tightly. "Ah!" the 16-year-old boy moaned in a low voice. The inexplicable pain was so intense that he completely forgot about the oncoming light. Instead, he bit his lip and blood dripped down. It landed on the black, dark green fire stick that had traces of blood red in it. The next moment, he was swallowed by the bright, sun-like light. The crowd cheered. The disciples of Morning Sun Peak were all delighted. However, there was a cry of surprise mixed with their laughter, which was extremely ear-piercing. Zheng Shu, who had suddenly appeared, ignored the dozens of hostile gazes around him and sighed loudly. He felt sorry for this new friend of his. It was a pity that he couldn't help him according to the rules of the examination. Otherwise, looking at his indignant expression, he would have rushed up to the stage. Even the white-bearded old man sitting at the side seemed to be startled by Zheng Shu and glanced over. On the stage, the bright golden light shined with the rising sun. Chu Yuang was proud. At this moment, he felt his cultivation had reached a peak that he had never reached before. And he, after winning against this unattractive opponent, he will surely advance. Even if he will be the winner in the end, it is still possible. After today, he only need to win 4 more battles. Thinking of this, he could not help but smile. The Xiaoyang celestial sword shone even brighter. He watched as the young man in front of him scrunched up his face in pain and even bit his lips. Suddenly, right at this moment, his heart fiercely jumped, as if someone had used a heavy hammer to ruthlessly smash into his body. At this moment, no one could see Sha Danan clearly. Chu Yu Wang, who was standing in front of Sha Danan, clearly saw Sha Danan raise his head and open his eyes to the bright light of Xiaoyang. That pair of blood-red eyes filled with murderous intent. An invisible coldness spread out. Chu Yu Wang saw the black fire stick seem to come alive. The bead on top of the stick shined with green light. It was like Sha Danan had turned into another person. All of this happened within the light of Xiaoyang. No one except Chu Yu Wang could see it. Chu Yu Hong was shocked, but before he could react, the cold aura that was hidden under the light of the Xiaoyang celestial sword had already wrapped around him. Almost immediately, he felt the world spinning around him, and he felt nauseous. A moment later, the green light from the bead on the fire stick shone on his body. Under the stage, Issa nervously looked at Sha Danan, who was surrounded by the light. Thinking that Sha Danan was like a barbecued monkey. Normally, it should be a pig being barbecued, but for some reason, Issa thought of a monkey he almost didn't want to watch anymore. On the contrary, the Sunrise Peak disciples were cheering and applauding. They were overjoyed. At this moment, everyone heard Chu Yu Wang roared. Xiaoyang rose to the sky. The light immediately disappeared. Sha Danan's figure appeared. Chu Yu Wang seemed to be heavily injured. After a moment, under everyone's surprised eyes, blood came out from his 7 orifices. He shakily pointed at Sha Danan with his right hand. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but he could not say anything. A moment later, his body swayed a few times, and with a thud, he fell to the ground, unconscious. Below the stage, there was silence. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, and they were shocked, speechless. Chapter 41. After a while, the white-bearded old man was the first to react. He jumped onto the stage and came next to Chu Yuang. He examined him and found he was perfectly fine. There was no sign of poison. Instead, it seemed he was heavily injured by the esper. His internal organs were severely shaken. He frowned, stood up, and looked at Sha Danan. He couldn't help but look at the young man in a new light. His eyes also glanced at the black fire stick in Sha Danan's hand. "You won." The white-bearded old man suppressed his doubt and said calmly. The morning sun-peaked disciples were in an uproar, but the truth was right in front of them. They had nothing to say. However, Chu Yuhong's defeat was too inexplicable. Victory was clearly in his grasp, but he suddenly lost with a roar. They couldn't accept it. Issa was also dumbfounded. But when he heard the white-bearded old man said those 3 words, he also rushed to Sha Danan. He heavily patted his shoulder, laughed loudly. "Good boy, so you are hiding your strength." Sha Danan suddenly turned his head. His face was like frost, staring at him coldly. That pair of cold but black eyes. Issa felt a chill in his heart, surprised. "Xiao Fan, what's wrong?" Sha Danan's body shook. He seemed to remember something. His eyes softened. The strange coldness in his eyes disappeared. His eyes returned to normal. With some confusion, said, "No, nothing. I am fine. What's wrong?" Issa stared at him. "Why are you asking me what's wrong? Why don't you ask me if you don't know you have won this battle?" Sha Danan was surprised. "What, I won? I won." Zheng Shushu was even more frightened by him. His face turned pale, and he hurriedly stretched out his hand to measure his forehead, saying, "Ku Yi, you couldn't have been burnt silly by that ball of fire just now, right?" Sha Danan scratched his head. He saw several Sunrise Peak disciples were carrying the unconscious Chu Yuang down from the stage. Some of them were looking at him hatefully. Watching those people walking further and further away, in Sha Danan's mind, the scene of the battle just now appeared clearly. He subconsciously lowered his head and looked at the black fire stick in his hand. The ugly stick was quietly in his hand, motionless. But in Sha Danan's eyes, the fire stick that had accompanied him for 2 years had never been so unfamiliar. It was like he had returned to the valley many years ago, reappearing that horrible nightmare. "Pa!" Issa looked at Sha Danan blankly, hit his head with the fan in his hand, said, "What are you thinking?" Sha Danan shook his head, sighed, put away the fire stick, said, "Nothing, let's go. By the way, why did you come and watch my match?" Zheng Shushu glanced at the fire stick in his bosom and said, "The competition hasn't started yet. I had nothing to do, so I came to watch your competition. I didn't expect to see such a good show." "Hey, that 3-eyed monkey of yours today, what did you call it again?" Sha Danan said. "Ash." Zheng Shushu said, "Right, Little Gray, why don't I see Little Gray today?" Sha Danan shook his head, said, "I haven't seen him since this morning. Probably he and Big Yella went somewhere to play." Issa said, His face was full of regret. Sha Danan could not help but think that this guy said he came to watch his match, but in fact he just wanted to see Ash. Wah! From afar, suddenly a loud commotion was heard. The 2 of them could hear it clearly even though they were far away. Looking up, they saw that in the center, Qing Yun's sect disciples were crowding around the Qian platform. Exclamations rose and fell. Before Sha Danan could react, Issa had already stomped his foot and cried, "Oh no, I was only looking at you and forgot the most important thing." Then he pulled Sha Danan and ran away. Sha Danan did not understand, asked while running, "What thing?" Issa's face was full of regret, said, "That is Ainan's match." Sha Danan could not help but smile. At the same time, his heart was touched. He looked at the friend he had only known for 2 days. Under the deserted platform, he could not see his elders Shixiangs, but only this person stood on his side under the platform filled with Sunrise Peak disciples. A warmth rose from his heart. "Master Issa." "Shushu, thank you for coming to see me." Issa, startled, slowed down, turned back and looked at Sha Danan, then smiled. "Haha, it's nothing. If you're too touched, why don't you take Ash? Let's go." Issa turned his body, shook his head, then followed Shah Danon, who was running as fast as the wind, mumbling something. When the two of them got closer, they saw that groups of Azure Cloud sect disciples had already dispersed. Most of them looked rather agitated and were arguing fiercely with each other. They raised their head and looked at the platform. There was no one on the platform, but the wooden platform was damaged. It seemed the match was already over. Issa rolled his eyes, pulled Shah Danon, and walked through the crowd. After a moment, he found his target, the Peak of Wind disciples. Issa quickly approached them. The Peak of Wind disciples saw him and laughed. A tall man that Shah Danon had some impression of said, "Shitty, didn't you say you must see Anan? Why did you disappear?" Zhang Shushu coughed dryly and said, "I'm not busy." "Oh right, quickly tell me the result." A man with thick eyebrows said, "Needless to say, with Aeolian Firmus, even Peak of Widows Duan Lei Shixiang is not her opponent." Issa was surprised. Even Duan Shixiang lost to her? Shah Danon asked Issa, "Is that Duan Lei Shixiang very strong?" Issa nodded. "Yes, Duan Lei is one of the most outstanding people in the main house. His chance of winning the Seven Peaks tournament is also very high." That tall man shook his head and said, "What use is that? You didn't see? Tianya's celestial sword power is really too great. The blue light flashed a few times, rang a few times, and Duan Lei's senior brother was defeated." Speaking till here, he seemed to be unsatisfied, sighed, and said, "Even if I tell you, you won't believe it. Until the end, Anan Sweki still did not unsheath Tianya's celestial sword." Issa was startled, said, "Then what's the point of the match? Who else can be her opponent?" The tall man shook his head. "Not really. Aeolian Firmus is a divine weapon. Even if it is not unsheathed, its power is still about the same. But Anan's cultivation is really amazing." Issa looked at him, said, "Gao Shixiao, how do you know?" Shah Danon looked at the tall man, thought to himself, "This surname is really true." Gao Shixiao said, "I heard it from Master." Issa was surprised, said, "My dad?" Gao Shixiao said, "Yes, when you weren't here just now, Master was also here watching." In the end, he muttered something to himself, saying that this woman has probably cultivated Tai Chi Xian Qing to the 8th level of Yuqing, maybe even the 9th level. Issa's face changed color. He was startled, unable to say anything. Shah Danon was puzzled. Issa said he didn't care about the result of the match, but he seemed to care about it very much. The sound of the bell came from far away. Gao Shixiang and the Peak of Wind disciples headed toward the sound. Shah Danon saw Issa was still standing there. "You want to pull him?" Issa woke up, smiled. It's over. We have no hope now." Shah Danon really didn't care, said, "It's over then, it's over. Right? You haven't had your match yet, right?" Issa looked at the distance, said, "I haven't started yet, but it's time to go. What about you? Where are you going?" Shah Danon thought for a moment, said, "I'm going to report to Master in Shenyang, even though I won by luck." Zhang Shushu nodded and said, "Then come and find me when you have time." Shah Danon nodded. Then they parted. Shah Danon turned around and walked to the other side of the crowd. The Jadian disciples were talking about the match between Anan and Duan Lei. After searching for a long time, Shah Danon finally found the Bamboo Peak people at the west side. But he saw Tian Belize was angry. His face was green. Shah Danon was always afraid of Tian Belize, so he sneaked up to him. Tian Belize glanced at him, then turned his eyes away, did not even ask him the result. Chapter 42. Serene, Jade, and other Bamboo Peak disciples were all there. Only the Shixiang Xavion was not there. Shah Danon glanced at everyone, saw Jade was fine, but the Shixiang's faces were full of frustration. He quietly asked Amandla, "Six Shixiang, what happened?" Du Baishu glanced at Tian Bui, saw that he did not seem to be looking at them, whispered, "Just now, other than Shixiang, all of us had a match. The result was only Xiao Shimi won. Teacher is still angry." Shah Danon was startled, did not know what to say. Serene was standing at the side. Seeing the disciples were trembling, Tian Beli's face was pale. She shook her head, sighed, softly said to Shah Danon, "Xiao Fan, you are back. What is the result?" Shah Danon hesitated, whispered, "Shenyang, I won by luck." Serene, "Oh, it doesn't matter. lost is lost, just take it as a knowledge. Her voice suddenly quieted down, looked at Sha Danon, surprised. What did you just say? Everyone, including Tian Bui, turned around and looked at Sha Danon at the same time. Sha Danon's face blushed, but for the first time in his life, under everyone's gaze, especially under Tian Linger's surprised gaze, he felt a trace of vanity excitement, slightly raised his voice, looked at Tian Bui, said, Teacher, Shenyang, just now I luckily won. Everyone was in an uproar. The Big Bamboo Peak crowd gathered below the Koan platform, watching Xavion's match, who would be the last to fight. On the platform, Xavion and his opponent were fighting fiercely. The 10 tigers' giant sword body seemed to have turned into countless fierce giant tigers in midair, making a loud noise that could shake the earth and mountains. The swords slashed toward the opponent, gaining the upper hand. However, under the platform, the Bamboo Peak people were happy, but still could not accept what Sha Danon said. Little junior brother, you're saying that you were about to lose in the match just now, but the guy called Chu Yu Hong suddenly fell ill and fainted after bleeding all over his face? Yes, 4th Shi Xiang Yu, and 2nd Shi Xiang, 3rd Shi Xiang, and 5th Shi Xiang have asked me 22 times. Why are you still asking? 6th senior brother, please persuade them. I'm telling the truth. Du Bai Shu. Little junior brother, you were saying that in the competition just now, you were about to lose, but unexpectedly that guy called Chu Yu Hong suddenly had an acute illness, bled all over his face and fainted? Sha Danon held his head, groaned, yeah, it's the 23rd time. Heidi, who was at the side, said, why are you guys forcing him like this? Won't Xiao Fan lie? At this point, she shook her head and said, but Xiao Fan, isn't it a little too much for you to be so lucky? It's no wonder that people don't believe you. Sha Danon was speechless. Listening to the incessant chatter of the disciples behind them, Tian Bui and Suru were still watching the stage. After a while, Suru suddenly said in a low voice, what do you think? Tian Bui's frowned, retorted, say he won with his own ability. Do you believe it? Suru smiled and said, this disciple of ours is really extraordinarily lucky. Tian Bui snorted. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and Song Darren, who was on the stage, roared. The 10 tigers' celestial swords' yellow light pierced through the sky, almost blinding everyone's eyes. It was as if it was splitting the mountains and splitting the seas, bringing with it an invincible momentum as it slaughtered its way over. The opponent finally couldn't withstand it and was defeated by this huge force. He spat out blood and flew backward. The Bamboo Peak disciples cheered thunderously. Tian Bai's face finally showed a smile. Xavion walked down from the stage and returned to the crowd. First, he greeted Tian Bui and Suru, then the crowd warmly congratulated him. Haha, lucky. 6th Shitty, don't be so mushy. Hey, Xiao Shitty, you're also back. How was the result today? Did you get hurt anywhere? Hey, look at you. Listen to the Shi Xiang. Your cultivation is still shallow. There will be opportunities in the future. Don't worry about this match. Why are you all looking at me like that? Tian Bui turned and walked away first. Suru smiled at her eldest disciple and followed. Xavion was puzzled, asked everyone what happened. Heidi walked next to him and told him. Xavion turned his head incredulously. Sha Danon shrunk his body in fear, said, to Shi Xiang, I know it's not a good thing that my luck is too good, but as like this, I can't do anything about it. Xavion opened his eyes wide. Xiao Shitty, you mean in the match just now, you were about to lose, but that guy called Chu Yu Wang suddenly got sick, bled all over his face and fainted? Sha Danon fell down in despair. By the end of the day, there were only 16 participants left in the Jade 7 Peaks tournament. Out of everyone's expectation, the Bamboo Peak, which had always been on the decline, had 3 participants, which was much better than the previous years. No matter what happened internally, Tian Bui's face was full of pride to the outside world. Today, his face was full of smiles. The disciples saw it and discussed it in private. Amandla, look at Master's happy face. He can hold his head high now. Wu Dui. Yeah, the Shi Xiang and Xiao Shimi really made him proud. He dodgy. It is a shame, although Xiao Shimi is young. She is much better than me, 4th Shi Xiang. Her future is limitless. Zheng Dali. Don't forget there is still Xiao Shidi. He also entered the third round. Amanla, why don't we make another bet to see what is the possibility of Xiao Shidi passing the next round? Do you dare to bet? Wu Di, Hidaji, Zheng Dali, Ladaxin. I bet he will lose. Double. Amanla. Cough. Hey, where did Shi Xiang go? Ah, Xiao Shidi? Xiao Shimmy. What happened? Where did everyone go? Hidaji thought for a moment, said, I don't know about Xiao Shidi and Xiao Shimmy, but to Shi Xiang I have a guess. Everyone looked at each other, said in unison, Small Bamboo Valley, Beimin Shiji. Xavion was the oldest, but his body suddenly shivered for no reason. Beimin saw it, felt strange, said, What happened to you? Xavion frowned, said, I don't know, my body suddenly felt cold. Beimin glanced at him, said, Don't tell me you have a guilty conscience. Xavion immediately shook his head like a rattle drum, said, There is no such thing, there is no such thing. Beimin's face relaxed, but still snorted, said, Then why did you sneak into my Small Bamboo Valley female disciple's room? A burst of laughter came from the side. Xavion awkwardly looked around. The competition had ended. Most of the Small Bamboo Valley female disciples had returned, each with a smile, looked at him with interest. Xavion blushed, changed the topic, said, Oh, why didn't I see my Xiao Shimmy? Beimin smiled and said, Your Xiao Shimmy was born beautiful. Her personality is also lively. Naturally, she has been asked out. Xavion was shocked, asked, What, asked out by who? Beimin shook her head and said, If you see your Ling Air Shimmy, you better advise her to be careful tomorrow. When Xavion talked about Hidi, he was not as awkward as when he was talking to one man alone. He spoke more fluently, frowned, and said, I know little Shimmy is going to compete with your Bamboo Heights Lu Sweki Shimmy tomorrow. Our two houses have always been good friends. There should be no problem. Besides, the Seven Peaks tournament is just a competition. Beimin looked at him, said lightly, Your Shenyang Su Shu is naturally good friends with my Shifu, but my Shifu is very unhappy with your Shifu. I'm afraid she is still blaming your Shifu for abducting our Su Shu. Xavion was stunned, wanted to say something, but saw Beimin looked at the Small Bamboo Valley female disciples. They were all quiet, looking at them. Xavion was surprised. What is it? Beimin looked at him, seemed to hesitate for a while, then said, Song Shi Xiang, Lu Shimmy is different from us. Her personality is a little strange, but Shifu dotes on her a lot. After going on the stage, everything is hard to say. Xavion's face changed, said, What? Beimin shut her mouth, did not continue. Chapter 43. Xiao Fan. Didn't you say you want to find Ash and the Big Yellow? Why did you bring me to the kitchen? Issa followed Shaw Danon into the kitchen and kept nagging. Shaw Danon took a closer look at the kitchen. It was many times more spacious than Bamboo Peak's kitchen. The light was also much brighter. He said, Although I haven't seen them since morning, I think they are probably here. Zhang Shushu shrugged his shoulders and said, That's impossible. What do you take the three-eyed spirit monkey for? It's a natural spiritual creature. It's even better than humans. Why do you look at it as if it's a thief? Moreover, it's a greedy thief. Under Issa's stunned expression, Shaw Danon picked up Ash from the back of a jar in the corner of the kitchen. Ash was held in mid-air, squeak, squeak. Then Big Yellow ran out from the back of the jar and barked loudly at them. Shaw Danon looked at Issa. Issa didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Holding Ash in his arms, Shaw Danon scolded Big Yellow. Stupid dog, stop barking. Do you want people to catch us? Big Yellow seemed to understand his words. It looked at Ash in Shaw Danon's arms. It hummed a few times, then went silent. Shaw Danon looked around. Most of the things were untouched. It seemed like the two thieves didn't get what they wanted. He quickly carried Ash and walked outside. After 2 steps, he found Big Yellow didn't follow. He turned around and saw Big Yellow ran to the jar with his tail between his legs, then came back with a big piece of meat bone in his mouth. Shaw Danon glared at Ash in his arms. Ash opened its monkey mouth and giggled. Zhang Shushu, who was watching from the side, shook his head. They sneaked out of the kitchen with Monkey and Hound. They were afraid of being discovered. If they were found, they would never be able to wash away their bad reputation. After they ran far away, they let out a sigh of relief. Shah Danon panted for a while, then said, "Right, I haven't congratulated you. You won another round." Issa didn't care. His eyes carefully looked at Ash and Shah Danon's arms, said, "That's nothing. Sooner or later, I will lose to someone." "Why is Ash so dirty? How many days have you not bathed him?" Shah Danon, startled, said, "Never bathed before." Issa was about to faint. He hit his forehead with his hand. You, how can you treat him like this?" Shah Danon didn't agree with it. He thought the monkey climbed up and down all day. How could it be clean? But seeing Issa's sad face, he knew he was unreasonable. He laughed dryly, changed the topic. "Right, in the third round tomorrow, Ainan's opponent is my Shiji. Zheng Shu was indeed surprised, and said, "It's your Shiji, the Tian Linger who uses the phoenix soul?" "Yes." Shah Danon patted Ash's head, said, "That Ainan has been in the limelight these days. I'm a little worried about my Shiji." Issa nodded. "That's right. Just the Aeolian firmus in Ainan's hand is unbearable." Shah Danon was a little worried, said, Shu, do you think my Shiji will be in danger?" Ainan destroyed her opponent's sword in the first round. In the second round, I heard the Shi Xiang from the main faction was also heavily injured. Zheng Shu glared at him and said, "You're thinking too much. I think your Shiji's cultivation is much higher than yours. You should worry about yourself. In the future, they'll get stronger and stronger. According to you, you haven't even reached the third level of pure essence Yuqing realm. You'll be killed by a sword. Let me hug little Gray." Shah Danon hesitated for a moment, then handed Ash to Issa. Issa happily held Ash in his arms. Ash was very dissatisfied and screamed. Shah Danon sighed. "You are right. Shiji's cultivation is high. She is also beautiful. So many people like her. How can I care about her?" Zheng Shu hugged Xiao Hui tightly, his eyes staring straight at it, as if afraid that he would be at a disadvantage if he missed a glance. He absent-mindedly said, "It's good that you know. It's better to think about how to survive tomorrow. Let me tell you, your opponent tomorrow is Senior Brother Peng Chong of the Return of the Wind Peak. His cultivation isn't something that Chu Yuhong can compare to today, especially the Wu Go sword he cultivates. It's made of 1,000-year fire copper and is very powerful." Shah Danon's face was bitter, frowning. "You all have espers on you. What can I do?" Issa did not lift his eyes, still looking at Ash. He walked forward, said, "Ash, come back with me. I will bring you 2 bunches of bananas. Okay?" Xiao Fan, what did you say just now?" Shah Danon walked shoulder to shoulder with him, sighed. "I really envy you all can control Esper. What is that feeling?" Issa shrugged. "Isn't it the same? After cultivating for a long time, the Esper will naturally have some connection with you. Using that, you can use your spirit power to control the Esper. Fly to the sky, dive into the ground, split open the mountain, and split open the sea. It is up to you." Shah Danon, startled, said, "Connection? Is it kind of cool feeling?" Issa's eyes were on Ash. He answered, "Not sure. It depends on the material of the Esper." Shah Danon thought for a moment, then shook his head and gave up the delusion in his mind. He said, Shu, I don't know how Aeolian Firmus was created. The scene must be very magnificent." Issa looked at Shah Danon strangely, said, "How would I know? It is also the first time I see such a legendary item." While speaking, he lowered his head to look at Xiao Hui, disregarding Xiao Hui's anger, beaming with joy as he stroked Xiao Hui's fur, and said, "But speaking about sensing, I have read from an ancient book before, a magical weapon that can truly communicate with a cultivator's mind is not these so-called divine treasures." Shah Danon was surprised. "Then what is it?" Zheng Shu said, "It is a magical weapon refined from the owner's own blood. Using the blood as a medium, the magical weapon often carries a demonic aura, but has the feeling of being connected to the owner's flesh and blood. Although the books say that these are all evil, and most of the magical weapons refined are evil and evil, the righteous do not do it. But these magical weapons can only be controlled by those who have the owner's blood, not like the magical weapons that we are practicing now. Once they fall into the hands of Senior with profound cultivation, they will be subdued." Issa stopped, and found there was no one next to him. He turned around and saw Sha Danan was standing behind him, staring at him. His face was strange. Issa was curious, asked, "What is it, Xiao Fan?" Sha Danan's body shook, forced a smile, said, "No, nothing." Zheng Shushu looked at him again, thinking that he was worried about tomorrow's match. He walked over with a smile and patted his shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, I've already talked to Senior Brother Peng. In tomorrow's match, he won't be too harsh on you. He'll even let you lose with dignity, so that you can answer to Master and Mistress." Sha Danan seemed absent-minded, but he still nodded, said, "Oh, thank you." They walked a few steps forward. Issa was busy looking at Ash in his arms. Sha Danan seemed to be full of thoughts, silent. After a while, Xiaohui seemed to be unable to endure Zheng Shushu's inhuman stare, angrily called out a few times, and stretched out its claws to grab Zheng Shushu. Zheng Shushu saw that from the start Xiaohui had been rather obedient. For a moment he let down his guard and was caught off guard by its sneak attack again. This time he really could not avoid it. A few wounds immediately appeared on his fair and clean face, and the pain made him release his hand. Ash regained freedom. It was very happy, but it did not return to Sha Danan. Instead, it ran quickly on the ground. In a few steps, it reached the two people who were walking toward it, and jumped onto one of them. Sha Danan startled. He raised his head and saw the girl was smiling like flower, standing among the white clouds. Her clothes were fluttering, the red silk on her waist, extremely beautiful. It was Hede. A burst of joy immediately welled up in his heart. Just as he was about to speak, suddenly the blood in his body turned cold again, straight into his heart. Beside Tian Linger stood a dashing and elegant man. If it was not Kiheo, who else could it be? At this time, Hede was also surprised. Usually Ash only pestered Sha Danan. She did not expect it would suddenly change its temperament and become intimate with her. It was really unexpected. Actually, in her heart, she quite liked this clever and quick-witted monkey, stroked Xiaohui, smiled and said, "Xiao Fan, why are you here?" Sha Danan was expressionless, said quietly, "My friend and I are here for a walk." Kevern, who was standing next to Hede, looked at Issa, smiled, saluted. "Tseng Shidi, we meet again." Issa did not dare to neglect. He returned the salute. "Chi Shi Xiao, hello." Hede looked at them, surprised. "You know each other?" Kevern smiled. Tseng Shidi is Peak of the Wind, Tseng Shirshu's beloved son. His family is very knowledgeable. His cultivation is high. This time 7 Peaks tournament will be our biggest enemy. Issa smiled. "Chi Shi Xiao, you are famous in Jadian. The young disciples of Jadian will naturally look up to you. I do not dare to be presumptuous." Kevern laughed. "Tseng Shidi flatter me. I do not deserve it." Hede saw Sha Danan's expression was a little strange. She walked to him, said, "Xiao Fan, what happened?" Sha Danan shook his head, said, "Shiji, you're going to fight with Anan from Bamboo Height tomorrow. You must be careful." Hede smiled, turned to Kevern. Kevern smiled, but did not say anything. Hede smiled back, then turned to Sha Danan. "I understand. Chi Shi Xiao's cultivation is high, and he is a friendly person. Because we are kindred spirits, he asked me to come out and teach me some important points in tomorrow's contest." Sha Danan lowered his head. After a long time, said bitterly, "Shiji, tomorrow when you fight, I also need to fight with Peak of the Wind's Peng Shi Xiao. I can't cheer for you. Be careful." Tian Linger said unconcernedly, "It doesn't matter, Xiao Fan. Father and mother have said that they will go and watch my competition. Besides," she looked at Kiheo affectionately and continued, "Chi Shi Xiao will also go and watch my competition. With his profound cultivation, with his guidance, I will definitely not lose." Kevern laughed from afar. "I can't guarantee that." Tian Linger turned her head back, stared at him, and then could not help but laughed out. Her white, jade-like skin was better than snow, slightly revealing a faint pink, extremely beautiful, almost making one stare in a daze. Issa, who was standing at the side, could clearly see Sha Danan's eyes and face quickly dimmed, almost lifeless. He could not help but frown. The night was deep. The cold moon was hanging high in the sky. Above cloud sea, there was no sound. A lonely shadow was wandering in the cold moonlight. Amidst the faint clouds, it was walking aimlessly. Unknowingly, he came to the rainbow bridge and came to the pond. The water was like a mirror. The reflection of the stars in the sky was like falling into the water. It was a beautiful day and beautiful scenery. But this person did not seem to notice it. He just stood beside the water, looking at the water like he was remembering something. After a while, his body suddenly trembled. His hands were clenched tightly. It seemed like he was in pain. Then he slowly turned his head, looked at the dark woods beside the rainbow bridge, and slowly walked toward it. The moonlight shined on Shaw Dannon's face. It was a bit sad. Should he always stand in the dark corner, quietly watching other people's happiness and taste his own pain? From far away, there was the sound of footsteps. Darkness was quietly lurking in this small forest. It's so late. Why did head Shixiang call us here? Following the voice, 6 figures appeared. Shaw Dannon hid in the dark. He was surprised. They were the heads of Jadian, except Peak of Widows. Tian Belize was also among them. The one who spoke was head of Sunrise Peak, Shang Zhengliang. Master Vast Kalo said, I heard head Shixiang had used psychic art to test with Master Spirit. I'm afraid he found something. He wants us to discuss it with him. Master Spirit, Water Kirin, is Jadian's spirit beast. It is very important. No one said anything. Their faces were serious. After a moment, they left. After those masters left for a long time, Shaw Dannon came out from the woods. He looked at the pond. The water was calm. It seemed like Master Spirit had already fallen asleep in the water. He raised his head and stared at the cold moon in the sky. When he was about to go back, he took out the black fire stick. Zhang Shushu's words during the day had shocked him greatly, causing him to be extremely bewildered. But at this moment, there were no other thoughts in his mind, only the image of Ling, Air Shiji, and Kevern standing together, looking very compatible. His heart was like being stabbed by needles. But now, it had become numb, empty, like his 3 souls and 7 spirits were gone. Chapter 44. He slowly picked up the fire stick. Under the dark green surface, many tiny blood-red lines were clearly visible. Like blood vessels, they covered the entire body of the stick, even the bead at the top. Is this my blood? Shaw Dannon thought lightly in his heart. The moment he heard what Issa said, he almost had the impulse to throw away the fire stick. However, Kevern and Hidi gave him a bigger impact. He did not care about the evil thing anymore. He laughed bitterly in a low voice. Even if it's a demonic object, it's still a powerful artifact. How could I have such a good life to be worthy of these things? Isn't it just an ugly fire stick that's with me? The cold feeling slowly rose from the fire stick, wandered in his body, like it was comforting him. Esper? Esper? Shaw Dannon gritted his teeth. Who am I? How can I use Esper? Towards the end, his voice was choked with sobs. Even that icy cold aura seemed to be startled by his sorrow. The throbbing feeling seemed to have become active. Shaw Dannon felt it, but he did not care about it. He thought it was the mountain wind that made his body cold. He slowly raised his head, looked at the fire stick in his hand. The scene of him going to the deep valley with Hidi appeared in his mind. It was like it was a lifetime ago. The blood vessels and the dark green color of the fire stick slowly brightened, like it was sensing something. Shaw Dannon accidentally saw it. His heart skipped a beat. He was surprised. At the same time, he remembered what Issa said. In his heart, there was an irrepressible impulse. He closed his eyes. In that instant, the cold feeling spread throughout his body, but there was not the slightest chill. There was no sound, but in the depths of his heart, he could clearly hear a wild roar. It was like the cries of countless wronged spirits from the 9 underworlds, carrying endless resentment as it soared up. White bones, blood, roar, blood. Shaw Dannon suddenly opened his eyes, breathed heavily. However, after a moment, he held his breath. His hand was spread out flat, his fingers either stretched or curled, forming the shape of a spell. The black fire stick had already flown away from his palm, standing in midair, black gas billowing and green light shining brightly. In front of the fire stick, a tree that was originally full of life in front of him in the small forest had completely withered at this moment. Its branches and leaves were scattered, as if all of its life had been sucked away by something in an instant. It was the first time in Shah Danan's life that he felt so intimate with the fire stick. Even though the fire stick was stopped in midair, but at this distance, he could clearly feel that he was holding the fire stick. The familiar cold air also became stronger than ever, in that there seemed to be a strange fresh air coming from the black stick and going through his body. At this moment, a deep roar came from behind Shah Danan. He turned his head in surprise and saw the water in the pond suddenly became chaotic. It seemed like something was disturbed. He didn't think any more and subconsciously ran. He quickly ran to the rainbow bridge and didn't look back. He ran forward until he ran across the rainbow bridge and came to the sea of clouds. He didn't feel anything strange behind him. Only then did he stop to catch his breath. After a long time, he stared at the black fire stick in his hand again. At that moment, the fire stick was just like usual, plain, ugly, and quietly lying in his hand. The next day, Jadian's Seven Peaks tournament entered the third round. 16 Jadian disciples were distributed on 8 stages, fighting at the same time. Among the 3 from Bamboo Peak, Shah Danan was arranged on Kin's stage. Xavion was arranged on Lee's stage. As for Hede and Ainan's fight, they were arranged on the largest and most conspicuous Qian stage. According to Shah Danan's friend Issa, who he had known for only 3 days, Jadian's old men had a big problem with the arena arrangement. But it was not surprising. The match between Ainan and Hede was the focus of everyone. Not to mention Ainan, who has Aeolian Firmus. Every time Jadian disciples fought with her, they would be surrounded by layers of people. Not even a drop of water could pass through. And Big Bamboo Valley's Tian Linger already had the reputation of being precocious in Qinyan's sect. In these 2 days, she displayed her skills even more, successively defeating strong enemies. Everyone's attention was on her. Her appearance was also incomparably elegant, and when compared to Lu Sueki, there were many gossips in private. Today, these 2 Qin sect's most outstanding female disciples in the past 100 years had met prematurely. The elders may have felt pity, but the young disciples were all overjoyed and had long surrounded Qiantai like an iron bucket. Xavion and Shah Danan stood in front of Tian Belize and said goodbye to him. Tian Belize looked at Xavion, said, "Today your opponent is Chong Jian from the main house. This person is very patient. He has cultivated for many years. His defense is very strong. It is the opposite of your cultivation, 10 tigers. You need to be careful." Xavion respectfully said, "Yes, master." Shah Danan felt the name was familiar. After thinking for a moment, he remembered it was Chong Jian who led him and Bei to Crystal Hall 5 years ago when he first came to the mountain. Thinking of this, he missed Bei again. He heard his good friend also won the 2nd round yesterday. His strength was outstanding and was seen as a genius by everyone. But he did not have time to congratulate him. Tian Belize looked at Shah Danan, who was standing next to Xavion. This unexpected disciple was standing there with his head down, silent. Tian Belize frowned, said, "7th, you also be careful. If you can't do it, it's okay to admit defeat. Just be careful not to get hurt." Shah Danan's body shook. Others could not tell what he was feeling. He said quietly, "Yes, master." Xavion looked at the distance, said to Tian Belize, "Master, it's late. Shao Shidi, and I will go." Tian Belize nodded. Serene, standing at the side, smiled and said, "Be careful." Xavion answered, then walked out of the circle with Shah Danan. Along the way, he faintly felt Shah Danan was not right today. He was not talking like usual, so he asked Shah Danan, "Shao Shidi, why don't you say anything today? Are you nervous?" Shah Danan looked at Shi Xiao, forced a smile, but did not answer. Xavion smiled cheerfully, said, "Don't think too much. Don't put too much emphasis on winning or losing. Although Master and Shirenyang care about their face, they won't blame you. Do you understand?" "Yes," Shah Danan answered, but in his heart he thought, "They don't have any expectation on me. Of course they won't blame me." Xavion nodded. They walked out of the crowd. It was not easy to squeeze in, but it was easy to get out. Xavion laughed. "Shao Shidi, we have to go our separate ways. Good luck to you. I hope you can win another round." Then, without waiting for Shah Danan to respond, he laughed. Sha Danan sighed, then walked toward his stage. Under the can stage, most of the Peak of Wind disciples were there. Sha Danan also saw Gao Shixiang and his people. Peak of Wind is one of the main branches of Jadian. The number of disciples is more than 200, just below Peak of Widows and Dragonhead Peak. It was clear that the Peak of Wind disciples heard something from Isa. They all looked relaxed. Seeing Sha Danan, they even smiled and nodded friendly. For some reason, Sha Danan suddenly felt the friendly smile of the people in front of him was so annoying, like they were looking down on him. He walked onto the arena expressionlessly. Behind him, below the arena, everyone stood opposite him. This time, even Zheng Shushu was not there, because he had his own battle to fight. But even if he was here, he should be cheering for his senior martial brother. In Sha Danan's heart, there was an indescribable loneliness. Standing on top of the high stage, countless eyes under the stage, but he did not have any friends. Why? Why did he always have to face everyone alone? He couldn't even see a single friend. The 16-year-old boy shouted in his heart. He stubbornly bit his lips and lowered his head. The mountain wind blew past his face. Dang! The bells and cauldrons rang out almost at the same time, reverberating throughout the peak of Tongtian and spreading far away. Sha Danan's heart jumped. His first thought was, Ling'er Shiji should have started her fight. Don't let her get hurt. Then his heart turned sour, thought, whether she gets hurt or not, it is not your business. Master and Shenyang are there. Even Kevern said he will go after finishing off his opponent. Haha, finish off his opponent as soon as possible. So impressive, so confident, really treating his opponent like nothing. As he thought this, he forgot that he was also in the arena, until the opponent standing in front of him shouted for the third time, Junior Brother Zhang. Sha Danan suddenly woke up. He raised his head and saw a Shixiang from Peak of Wind was standing in front of him. He was tall, but his expression was quite gentle. But seeing Sha Danan was spacing out, his expression was a bit strange. Sha Danan's face was red. Laughter came from the audience. Peng Chong smiled and saluted. I am Peak of Wind, disciple Peng Chong. Please enlighten me, Zhang Shidi. Sha Danan quickly returned the salute. Bamboo Peak, disciple, Sha Danan greet Peng Shixiang. They greeted each other. Peng Chong smiled, looked at Sha Danan, then lowered his voice. Zhang Shidi, Tseng Shidi has already told me about you. Sha Danan's body shook, suddenly blurted out. Peng Shixiang, please come at me. Peng Chong, startled, carefully looked at Sha Danan. After a while, he took back his smile and nodded. His right hand drew across in front of him. Clang, a sword glowing with red light, almost like it was surrounded by burning flame, appeared. This sword is Wu Go, made from 1,000 years old fire copper. Please enlighten me, Zhang Shidi. For some unknown reason, Peng Chang's entire expression was solemn, and his bearing was awe-inspiring. It was as if he was speaking to an evenly matched enemy. Sha Danan could feel the heat from far away. The heat was strong and fierce. It was completely different from the gentle righteousness of Chu Yu Wang's Xiaoyang celestial sword. It was more overbearing. Sha Danan's heart uncontrollably sped up. When he thought of the result he was about to face, he was so nervous that his body was slightly trembling. But he gritted his teeth, tried his best to control himself, took out the black fire stick from his chest. A burst of ear-piercing laughter came from below the stage. Sha Danan's body shook like he was pricked by a needle. Peng Chong, who was standing in front of him, did not smile. He looked at the black fire stick and said seriously, Junior Brother Zhang, please. Sha Danan looked at his opponent. Behind the burning flame, Peng Chong was like an ancient god of fire. His whole person was different. The hot flame caused smoke to float in the air. Even his face was a little blurred. Holding the black fire stick tightly, Sha Danan once again felt the connection between flesh and blood. It seemed like it knew the master's mood. The cold feeling boiled again. The black and ugly-looking fire stick slowly rose into the air, leaving his palm, emitting a dark green light. Even though it was ugly, even though it was weak, but as it stood in the air, facing the seemingly unstoppable and omnipotent powerful flame, it and its master did not have the slightest intention of retreating. One person, one fire stick, facing the whole world. Under the stage, the laughter slowly calmed down. People held their breath for some reason. That huge ball of flame grew stronger and stronger, and no one knew what it was burning for it to burn so vigorously. The disciples of the peak of the wind below the stage all felt the heat pressing down on them, and the disciples with lower cultivation even retreated. Those who were close to Zheng Shu and knew the inside story, such as Gao Shixiang and the others, changed their expressions. Everyone could see that Peng Chong did not look like he was being lenient at all, but was going all out, fighting to the death. The fire dragon was getting bigger. It almost covered the sky above the stage. Looking from afar, Sha Danan's clothes, even his hair and eyebrows, were showing signs of being burnt. It was possible to imagine the feeling of being in the furnace. Creepy. However, that young man stood there. Although there was pain on his face, he did not flinch. Although there was fear in his eyes, it was still fanatical. The flame deep in his heart was also burning in his eyes. A roar. The huge fire dragon swallowed everything in the world. It was like a moment, but it was frozen for a lifetime. Sha Danan roared to the sky. The green light of the fire stick rushed into the flame. A deafening roar rang out amidst the raging flames. Under the stage, Gao Shixiang and others looked at each other. After a while, they sighed. How could it become like this? Chapter 45. Good. Thunderous applause. Under the Qian platform, it was a completely different world. Everyone was shouting loudly, mesmerized by the two beautiful figures on the platform. Phoenix Soul's light, Aeolian Firmus's endless blue light, made the place look like a fairyland, very beautiful. But what was more beautiful were the two young ladies flying back and forth. The contest had been going on since morning. 2 hours had passed. The winner was still undecided. Especially Bamboo Peak's Hede. Under the attack of Ainan's Aeolian Firmus, she was able to defend and attack for such a long time without showing any sign of losing. Below the stage, Tianbui, Su, Shuiwa Master, and the other senior masters from both branches were all there. Even sect head Reverend Daoxian was sitting on the chair, watching the exciting competition, a smile on his lips, nodding frequently, feeling gratified. Tian Belize and Serene were connected by family, so he was even more nervous. But seeing Hede's magic was not at a disadvantage, he was a little relieved. Tian Belize looked at his wife, saw her nervous expression. He said softly, "Relax, Ling Air is fine." Suru turned her head and glanced at her husband. She smiled faintly and turned her head to look at the stage again. Tian Belize shook his head. Suddenly he noticed the disciples behind him. Even the disciples of other houses further away were in a commotion. He turned and looked. Even with his high cultivation, he was startled. The crowd automatically opened up a narrow path. Sha Danan slowly walked over. His clothes were all burnt. Some places were still smoking. His face, hands, body were all burnt black. A pungent smell came to his face. Everyone could see that he was walking with great difficulty, as if every step he took all his strength. But for some reason, he still persisted in walking forward. Tian Belize watched his youngest disciple slowly walk over. Without saying a word, his short and fat body left his seat and stood up. Surin felt something, strangely looked at her husband, then found something was wrong. She followed his gaze. Immediately her face turned pale and also stood up. At this moment, even more people looked over. Sha Danan walked in front of Tian Belize. Tian Belize looked at the disciple he ignored the most. Seeing his stubbornness, an uncontrollable anger rose in his heart. The anger was so strong that even though he tried to suppress it, everyone could still hear his anger. Seventh, who is it that hurt you like this? Isn't winning enough? Surin's body shook. She knew her husband was really angry because of this little disciple. She was a little worried. She pulled Tian Belize, but her eyes fell on Sha Danan. On both sides, the big Bamboo Peak disciples, because they were too shocked, all stood rooted to the ground, forgetting to help their little junior brother. On the stage, Lu Sweki and Tian Linger were fighting fiercely, magical weapons flying around in the air. The atmosphere was awe-inspiring. Sha Danon took a deep look at the stage, then looked at his master. He saw the anger on his master's fat face, and also a hint of concern. He shook his head wearily and said in a low voice, "No, master, I won." After saying that, he felt a wave of dizziness in his head. In an instant, the world turned dark, and with a plop, he fell to the ground and fainted. Sha Danon fell on the ground, unconscious. But what he said before he fainted stunned all Bamboo Peak disciples from Tian Belize. After a moment, Tian Belize and others reacted and helped Sha Danon up. Tian Bui carefully examined him, discovered that this little disciple's body was covered with scars as if he was roasted by a big fire. But his internal organs were fine. Fainting was most likely due to exhaustion. He did not know what exactly happened in that competition. He pondered for a moment. From the corner of his eyes, he saw more and more people were looking at them. He didn't want to stand here and be watched by everyone. He picked up Sha Danon, whispered to Serene, "I will bring Seventh back. You stay here and look after Lingair." Serene frowned, but still nodded. She looked at Sha Danon, who had his eyes closed. The anxiety on her face could not be hidden anymore. The Bamboo Peak disciples also gathered around. Amandla said, "Master, I will go with you." Tian Belize shook his head. "No need." At that moment, even Master Doyleshin's attention was attracted, said, "Tian Shitty, is this your disciple? What happened?" Tian Belize said lightly, "He is not good at learning, so he got some minor injuries. I will take him to get some treatment. Excuse me." Master Doyleshin nodded, turned around, and looked at the wonderful battle on the stage. As Tian Belize carried Sha Danon out of the crowd, the matter quickly calmed down. People were excited for the two beauties on the stage again. Only a few young disciples who were standing at the edge of the crowd noticed most of the Peak of Wind disciples were gathering in groups of 3 to 5. If Sha Danon was here, he would be able to tell that was the place where Issa fought. Under the 9 hells, the Hall of Yama, everywhere was burning fire, roasting people who were crying and screaming. The smell of burnt blood made people want to vomit. Sha Danon felt the world was spinning, but at that moment, he suddenly returned to a peaceful village many years ago. The cool breeze was pleasant. However, a clap of thunder resounded through the sky. The dark clouds in the sky were like mountains, surging like a raging sea. In the blink of an eye, the amiable villagers had turned into a mountain of corpses. The peaceful village had turned into hell on earth. "No!" he shouted with all his might, tensing all the muscles in his body. A piercing pain came from his chest, causing him to suck in a breath of cold air. His whole body trembled, and he woke up with a start. Wake up, Xiao Fan, wake up." The familiar voice that seemed to have been engraved in the depths of his heart rang out at the first instant. It was tinged with worry and joy. Sha Danon opened his eyes and saw Hede. It was like he returned to the past. She was wearing a red dress. Phoenix Soul was still around her waist. Her soft hair fell on her white neck, set off her pale face. Her bright eyes, pure eyes. Sha Danon could even see his own shadow in them. "Shiji," he shouted from the bottom of his heart. Sha Danon looked at her, did not even blink. If this moment could become eternal, how good it would be. In the room, everyone from Bamboo Peak surrounded him. Tian Belize took his pulse, nodded. "Okay, everything is fine now." Everyone was relieved. Each of them showed a relieved smile. Sha Danon looked around and saw everyone from Bamboo Peak was here. He was lying on the bed in the room. Shi Xiangs were standing on the ground. Tian Belize and Serene were sitting on the chair in front of the bed. What happened?" Hede smiled. "Don't tell me you forgot so fast. During the day you fought with Peak of the Wind's Pengchong. You fainted when you came back. It scared everyone. Luckily nothing serious happened." Sha Danon moved his body. Apart from some tiredness and some pain in his chest, the rest of his body was fine. He was surprised. "How could it be like this? My body is all." Tian Bui interrupted. "Those charred areas are only superficial wounds. Just use our Jadian's secret elixir to rub it, and it will be fine. Right now, you only suffered a heavy blow on your chest, but your bones and meridians are not shaken. Rest for a few days, and you will be fine." Suru, who was sitting at the side, smiled and said, "Xiao Fan, you still haven't thanked teacher. If it wasn't for him personally saving you, Just the external injuries, you would have to rest for at least half a year. Shah Danan was surprised. His heart was surprised, but he was still grateful. He said quietly, "Disciple is useless, burdening master again." Tian Beli snorted. His face turned cold, said, "How are you useless? You are the most capable person in Bamboo Peak." Shah Danan was surprised again, did not know what Tian Beli meant. He could only say, "Master, I know, like Shiji, and a Shixiang and other Shixiangs, they're far better than me. I don't dare." Then his voice became smaller. He looked at the Shixiangs and Hidi. Their faces were a little strange, especially to Shixiang. Today his face looked very pale. He was not as energetic as usual. He looked like he was about to fall. Suru sighed and said, "Dashin, bring a chair for your eldest senior brother to sit on." Ladaxin quickly answered, took a chair, and put it next to Xavion. Xavion wanted to refuse, but his body shook a few times. He finally sat down and breathed heavily. Shah Danan was stunned, said, "Dashi Xiao, what happened to you?" Xavion smiled bitterly, but did not say anything. Fourth disciple, He Daji, said, "Xiao Shidi, Seven Peaks tournament has reached the 4th round. You're the only one left in Bamboo Peak." Then he looked around. Shah Danan was stunned for a moment, then remembered something, turned to Hidi, who was sitting at the head of the bed, and said, "Shiji, then you also." Hidi's face darkened, said quietly, "I also lost." Shah Danan saw the disappointment in her face. His heart was hurt, but at this moment he could not let his imagination run wild. Tian Belize looked at Shah Danan up and down. His face darkened, said 7th. Shah Danan's heart jumped. He could hear the anger in Tian Belize's words. Then he saw his master's face was very ugly. He could not help but feel afraid, said, "Yes, master. Is there anything?" Not waiting for him to finish, Tian Belize stared at Shah Danan, said, "Where did your cultivation come from?" Shah Danan's head was buzzing. He opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. He looked at everyone in the room one by one, only to see that the senior brothers, who were usually kind and familiar with him, were also silent at this time, looking at him with doubtful gazes. No wonder a normally stupid Xiao Shidi suddenly shocked everyone. No one could accept it in such a short time. Under Tian Belize's aggressive eyes, sweat was dripping from Shah Danan's forehead. For a moment, he almost blurted out to tell his master that he was secretly practicing another faction's cultivation method. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he held it back. He was not the ignorant boy 5 years ago. From his Shixiang's conversation, he already knew the name of Sky Song Temple. He also knew the real identity of the skinny old monk named Posey that night. All these years, he had been cultivating the great Brahmin wisdom technique alone, but deep in his heart, his gratitude towards Puji had never diminished. Chapter 46. I know, disciple is stupid. My cultivation has not improved much these years. Shah Danan lowered his head, did not dare to face Tian Belize's eyes. He said slowly, "A few days ago, disciple suddenly found out he can move some things, but disciple could not believe it, so did not dare to tell master and Shenyang, did not expect." Tian Belize laughed coldly, said, "Did not expect you can amaze the world this time." Shah Danan quickly said, "No, it's not like that, master." Tian Belize is not so easy to deceive, he said coldly. "You said you can move things, but this requires at least you Qing 4th level cultivation. I asked Aaron, he only taught you the 2nd level incantation. Can you tell me, this ignorant master, how did you bypass the 3rd level and reach the 4th level?" At the end of his words, his voice was extremely cold, with a bit of anger. Everyone's face changed. Shah Danan did not say anything. The room was silent. After a long time, when Tian Belize's face was getting worse, and everyone's worry was getting heavier, Shah Danan quietly climbed up. He was still very tired, but he still struggled to get off the bed. Then, in front of everyone, under Hidi's crystal-clear eyes, he kneeled down in front of Tian Belize. Tian Belize was not moved, said coldly, "What?" Shah Danan lowered his head. His eyes were staring at the small piece of land below him. He did not look at anyone else, whispered, "Master, please punish me." Everyone was shocked. Tian Belize was even angrier. Suru frowned, said, Xiao Fan, if you have any misgivings, just tell your master directly. Why must you do this? Sha Danan kneeled on the ground, motionless. Tian Beli sneered. He laughed out of anger, said, Good, good, good. You're a tough bone. I also got a good disciple. Sha Danan's body trembled on the ground. No one knew what his mood and expression was. In this room, it seemed like there was someone else's breathing suddenly quickened. He lowered his voice and said, It's all my fault. Master, please punish me. Tian Belize suddenly stood up with a crack. The chair under him broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Everyone's face changed. He angrily said to Sha Danan, It's all your fault. Ha ha. Do you know that stealing a master skill is the biggest taboo in Jadian? Light punishment is to face the wall for decades. Heavy punishment is to destroy your cultivation and be expelled from Jadian. Do you know? Sha Danan suddenly raised his head and looked at Tian Belize. His master's face was filled with anger, but there was no trace of exaggeration. Sha Danan's heart sank. How could this be? He painfully muttered in his heart. At that time, when Tian Linger secretly passed him the incantation, it was not what she said. However, in the end, he still didn't turn around to look. There was a dead silence in the room. No one said a word. All that was left was the sound of anxious panting. A person's heart, in this silence, quietly, coldly chilled, like a crazy but rational person looking at himself. Sha Danan closed his eyes, lowered his head again, like a desperate person slowly taking the last step. Disciple is unfilial. Please punish me, master. Bang! A strong force came. Sha Danan flew backward and hit the wall. He fell on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone's face changed. Xavion forced himself to kneel down. The other disciples also kneeled in front of Tian Beli, said, Master, please forgive Xiao Shidi. Xavion said, Master, Kiki, it's my fault for not teaching Xiao Shidi well. Let Xiao Shidi do the wrong thing. The fault is all on me. Please forgive Xiao Shidi. Amidst the begging, Hidi stood still, staring at Sha Danan, struggling in the corner of the wall, blood spilling on his clothes. Her face was pale, without a trace of blood. Tian Belize looked at the disciples kneeling at his feet, then stared at Sha Danan in the corner of the wall. His face was full of anger. He snorted angrily, swung his sleeve, and walked out. Serene looked at everyone, shook her head, sighed, said to Xavion and others, You all get up. Then she looked at Sha Danan, then said to Xavion, who was helped up by Hidaji, You all go take care of Xiao Fan. I need to go see your master. Xavion and others quickly said, Yes, Shernyan. Serene sighed again, then walked out. Inside the room, everyone looked at each other. After a while, Hidi slowly walked to them, with her back facing them, helped Sha Danan up. Sha Danan's mouth was foaming. He was lying in her arms, but he still smiled. At that moment, a cool teardrop quietly fell into the pool of blood on his face. It was already late at night. Above the cloud sea, the clouds were still floating, beautiful like a fairyland. Tian Belize stood in the square, looking up at the sky. The night sky was filled with countless stars. The moon was as cold as frost. Behind him, familiar footsteps could be heard. Suru walked to his side and looked up at the starry sky. She smiled faintly and said, Are you feeling better? Tian Belize snorted, did not say anything. Serene smiled, said, You can fool Darren, Lingair, and others, but you can't fool me. The force of your sleeve was purposely shaking Xiao Fan's meridian in his chest, so that the clotted blood in his chest could be forced out of his body, right? Tian Belize looked at the night sky, did not say anything. Serene shook her head, said, You are already a few hundred years old. Why are you still so concerned about your face? Tian Belize turned his head, glared at his wife, said, It's not like you didn't see. That brat was acting like he was something. Master, please punish me. He imitated Sha Danan's tone and said it again, said angrily, It was his fault, but he said it like he was wronged. Instead, it was me who bullied him, forced him. This is preposterous. Serene looked at the direction of the residence, said, I don't believe you didn't see it. Tian Belize said, What? Serene said lightly, Lingair's behavior is very strange, don't you think? Tian Belize snorted. Serene smiled. You also saw it. Xiao Fan has been staying in Bamboo Peak for 5 years and never went out. It can only be that our disciples secretly taught him. Ling Er and Xiao Fan have a good relationship. She relied on us to spoil her, secretly taught Xiao Fan the 3rd level of incantation. And if she didn't have a guilty conscience, with her usual personality of standing up for Yi Fun and everything, why didn't she say a word this time? If it is not her, who else could it be? Tian Belize seemed to have expected what his wife said. There was no surprise on his face, but there was still anger. Unwillingly said, even if it is Ling Er's fault, but look at Sha Danan. In front of so many disciples, he refused to say anything. Damn it. Serene laughed, patted her husband's shoulder, said, you also have the personality of refusing to admit your mistake and still blame a child. Besides, Xiao Fan did all this for Ling Er. This kind intention is very rare. Tian Belize rolled his eyes, but did not say anything. Serene looked at him, said, then how are you going to clean up after you go back? The crime of stealing from Master can be big or small. How about we don't go too far for Ling Er's sake? Let Xiao Fan go back to Bamboo Peak tomorrow and face the wall for 30 to 50 years. Tian Belize, startled, snorted, said, it is not easy for my house to have a disciple, a genius. Letting him face the wall is just letting Vasp Kalo, Shang Zhongliang, and others have it easy. Don't even think about it. Tomorrow, no matter if he lives or dies, let him continue to participate in the contest. Serene smiled sweetly, walked up and held her husband's hand, smiled. I know you are a tough mouth but a soft heart. Tian Belize's fat face blushed a little, but immediately returned to normal. He looked around, said, we are an old couple. Aren't you afraid of people laughing at us? Serene glanced at him, her eyes full of smiles, said, what? You are afraid now that you are the head of the house. 300 years ago, on this Tong Tian Peak, during the 7 Peaks martial arts competition, you sneaked into my residence late at night and called me here. At that time, my master, Master Jinyu, and senior sister Shuiwei were nearby, but I didn't see you being afraid. Tian Belize laughed. Your master Zhonyu was 600 years old at that time. He is old and senile. I am not afraid. As for your evil Shiji, I have not liked her for a long time. If she wants to be alone for the rest of her life, then so be it, but she wants to drag you down. I hate her more than enough. Why would I be afraid of her? Serene glared at him, said, don't say bad things about my master and Shiji. All of them have deep feelings for me. Tian Belize shrugged, did not say anything. Under the moonlight, his short and fat body shook a little. It was quite funny. Looking at his expression, there was actually a little bit of pride, as if no matter how good they are to you, you still married me. Serene saw it, couldn't help but scolded, old and frivolous. Tian Belize was in a good mood. He held his wife's smooth hand, slowly walked in the sea of clouds. All right, I forgot one important thing. What is it? That brat used a fire stick as an esper, and used it so well. I was so angry just now that I forgot to take a look at that thing. Xiao Fan is still practicing on his own. I'm afraid he doesn't know much about using the esper. Do you think we should find some time to give him some advice? Let's see. Last night, faction head senior brother called several first seats over. He said that after he communicated with the spiritual venerable through the psychic technique, he found that the spiritual venerable acted because it sensed the murderous aura of some ferocious creature, but we couldn't find it later. Then what should we do? What else can we do? If we can't find it, then we can't find it. Master Spirit has lived at least 6,000 years. Your master became muddle-headed at 600 years old. It is not strange that Master Spirit is muddle-headed now. Chapter 47. The next day, the sun rose as usual. The Bamboo Peak people arrived at the square. They found 4 of the original 8 platforms had been removed. The remaining platforms were arranged in 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. Tian Belize and Serene walked in front. Sha Danan's wounds seemed to have healed overnight. Walking among the crowd, he was flattered as he had never received such attention before. He turned around and whispered to Amandla, 6 Shixiang, is the Shixiang hurt very badly? How come he can't walk anymore? Du Baishu shook his head and said, teacher had shown it to the Shixiang this morning. He said that in yesterday's competition, he and Chang Jian Shixiang's duel was too intense, and one was the main attacker, the other was the main defender. After fighting back and forth, both of them were injured and their energy channels were injured. I'm afraid his cultivation is not light. Sha Danan was surprised, said, even to Shixiang couldn't defeat him. Today when I fought Debane Shixiang, didn't I get beaten badly by him? Amandla rolled his eyes, said, according to common sense, of course so. But according to common sense, 2 days ago when you were fighting, most of the Shixiang bet that you lost. Sha Danan was speechless and closed his mouth. Under the largest arena in the north, there was a sea of people. Needless to say, Anan was fighting there today. Tian Belize glanced over there, snorted. He naturally did not have a good impression of the person who defeated his daughter, immediately led his disciples to the west arena. After a few steps, Sha Danan's body shook. He saw a group of people were coming from the side. The leader was an old man. Next to him was Isa. Behind them, there were about 100 peak of Wind disciples. Sha Danan saw Gao Shixiang's group, but did not see Peng Chang. Seeming to have noticed Sha Danan's searching eyes, when they passed each other, Isa suddenly said to Sha Danan, Peng Shixiang did not come. He is resting in his room. Sha Danan forced a smile, but saw Isa's face was serious. His eyes were also cold. The old man in the lead was naturally the head of the Peak of the Wind, Zheng Shuchang. He glanced at Sha Danan. Sha Danan felt the old man's eyes were not sharp, but extremely deep, like he could see through his heart with just a glance. He could not help but shrink back. At this moment, Tian Bui said, Zheng Shixiang, how are you? Zheng Shuchang returned the greeting. Tian Shixiang, I heard there is a prodigy called Sha Danan in your faction. His cultivation is special. Yesterday, he fought with my useless disciple Peng Chang and beat him to death. Sha Danan's face changed. He exclaimed, what? Peng Shixiang is that heavily injured. As soon as these words were spoken, the disciples of the Peak of the Wind were in an uproar. They felt that this person was extremely vicious. After injuring someone, he pretended to be surprised, showing that he did not mean to mock Peng Chang. Anger flashed across Zheng Shuchang's eyes, but he could not do anything to the younger generation. He smiled coldly, said to Tian Bui, Tian Shixiang, you have taught a good disciple. Tian Bui was frowning, thought Sha Danan did not know how to speak well. But after hearing what Zheng Shuchang said, it seemed to be mocking him. Tian Bai's character was very protective. He immediately smiled to Zheng Shuchang. Not at all. Zheng Shixiang is flattering me. Xiao Fan, come and greet Zheng Shu. Sha Danan startled. Zheng Shuchang's face changed. He waved his sleeve, said coldly, no need. Then he left. Isa looked at Sha Danan, said lightly, I didn't know you were hiding your strength. I even begged Peng Shixiang to be merciful. Didn't expect it would hurt him. Sha Danan was worried, said I didn't. Before he finished, Isa had already left. The Peak of Wind people followed. Their eyes were cold. Sha Danan's heart was sad. At this moment, he saw Gao Shixiang walked in front of him and suddenly blinked. Sha Danan was startled, but Gao Shixiang had already left. Tian Bui glanced at the Peak of the Wind, smiled coldly, waved his hand, and led them to the west stage. When they came closer, they found that there were actually 200 people surrounding the place. Looking at it, other than Anan's platform, this was the most crowded place in the Cloud Sea Square. Sha Danan gasped, whispered to the Shixiang next to him, so many people, that Duan Jian Shixiang is very strong, right? Everyone laughed. Hidaji said seriously, Senior Apprentice Brother Chang's Taoism is profound, but I think most of these people are here to see you. Junior Apprentice Brother. Sha Danan was surprised, said, How come? Hidaji laughed and said, up until today, there are only 8 contestants left in the 7 Peaks competition. Among them, you are the biggest dark horse. Who doesn't want to see how many mouths or hands you have? Sha Danan was speechless. Tian Belize led them to the stage. Along the way, the crowd saw they were from Bamboo Peak. They all moved away and made a path for them. Tian Bui looked around, saw that there were quite a number of main house disciples in the crowd, probably because of the main house's Changjian today. So the number of main house disciples who came to watch also increased, but there were not many main house elders. Qingyun's sect head, Reverend Daoxian, was also not here. Tian Belize frowned, whispered to Serene, "How come head Shi Xiang is not here? Are there any other disciples from the main house?" Serene shook her head, said no. This year, I don't know why the main house disciples are not good. Only Duan Jian is left. Tian Belize pondered for a moment, then walked to the center of the stage. There were 5 or 6 chairs there, but only a white-bearded old man was sitting there. Seeing Tian Belize and others arrived, the old man also stood up. Sha Danan was startled. He recognized the white-bearded old man was the one who sat under the stage during his match with Chu Yuang. The white-bearded old man also remembered Sha Danan. His eyes drifted to Sha Danan, then said to Tian Belize, "Tian Shi Xiang, I can't believe there's a talent in your house this year." Tian Belize seemed to have a good relationship with the old man. He laughed. "Fan Shi Xiang is flattering me. Please sit." At this moment, the bell rang. Tian Belize turned to Sha Danan. "Seventh, you go on stage." Hundreds of eyes immediately swept over and landed on Sha Danan. Sha Danan had never been stared at by so many people. His face was hot. He answered, "Yes." Then he turned his head and walked to the stage. After a few steps, he was pulled by Serene. Sha Danan was surprised, asked, "Shenyang, what is it?" Serene smiled, but there was concern on her face, said, "Does your body still hurt?" Sha Danan shook his head. "Master personally healed me. It is almost healed." Serene also shook her head, said, "External injuries are easy, but internal injuries are not so fast. Xiao Fan, your opponent today, Chang Jian, is not to be underestimated. Your eldest senior brother was defeated by him. Although I heard from your eldest senior brother that even if he won, it would not be easy, but with your half-baked cultivation, I'm afraid you still won't be able to do it. Don't try to show off later. If you can't do it, just admit defeat. Don't take the risk of getting injured, understand?" Sha Danan's heart warmed, but he did not nod, only murmured, "Master, we'll be angry." Serene smiled and shook her head, said, "Silly child, don't worry. Your master loves you so much." Sha Danan felt a loud noise in his head. He immediately turned to Tian Belize and saw Tian Belize was chatting happily with a white-bearded old man named Fan. Neither of them looked at him. Suru gently patted his head and said, "Go." Sha Danan slowly walked to the stage. He stood alone on the stage, but Suren's words were still echoing in his head. "Your master loves you so much." His mind was in a mess since young, since entering Jadian. In his mind, Tian Belize was no different from a deity, although Tian Belize did not treat him well, but to be able to get his master's approval was always the young Sha Danan's biggest wish. And now, suddenly hearing what Shenyang said, he could not believe it. He thought for a while on the stage, but the audience was discussing. After a while, even Sha Danan felt something was wrong. His opponent still had not come. Chapter 48. Below the stage, the disciples of the main sect were especially anxious. Most of them looked back and looked around. At this moment, a disciple of the main sect ran over with an anxious expression. He ignored the strange looks of the people around him and rushed to the side of the white-bearded old man. He hurriedly said a few words in his ear. The white-bearded old man's face changed. He couldn't believe it, asked, "Really?" That disciple looked at the stage hatefully, then nodded heavily. The white-bearded old man's face turned gray. He fell on the chair with frustration. Tian Belize saw this, felt very strange, said, "Fan Shi Xiang, what happened?" The white-bearded old man looked at him weakly and let out a long sigh. He pulled himself together and stood up again. In a clear voice, he said, "Chang Jian, disciple of the main gate, because of yesterday's injuries, I am unable to get up. I forfeit today's match." On and off the stage, there was silence. After a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Even though most of the Qingyun sect disciples were cultivators, but there were still many who cursed out and Big Bamboo Valley disciples. Their first reaction was not surprise. Instead, all of their expressions were strange. Looking at each other after a long time, all of them shook their heads and smiled bitterly. When the people behind them were changing their expressions, when the voices were in a hubbub, Tian Bui and Suru slowly stood up, looked at her little disciple who was still in a daze on the stage. Suru smiled, quietly said to Tian Bui, "I have already said, your little disciple's luck is really extraordinarily good." Tian Belize was speechless, smiled bitterly. That day, Shah Danan spent his days under the strange eyes of others. Almost every Jadian disciple who passed by him looked at him a few more times, like he was a rare beast. At the same time, the result of the match was out. Shah Danan was lucky to be in the top 4 with Kevern, Anan, and Issa. Kevern was the most popular candidate for the first place. Anan was popular these days, but Issa and Shah Danan being in the top 4 was beyond most of the Jadian elders' expectation. Before this, Zhang Shushu was known as Zhang Shuchong's only son, although he was recognized as a young talent in the Return of the Wind Valley. But in Qingyun's sect, he was not very famous. This time, he overcame all the difficulties. His exquisite skills made everyone look at him in a new light. In contrast, Shah Danan, standing among the 4 of them, was an eyesore. On the arena, 4 people stood side by side. Sect head Reverend Doyle Shun and Longsho Valley head Taoist Song Song stood in front. Reverend Dao Xian still had a smile on his face. One could not tell that he was dissatisfied with the unexpected annihilation of the main sect disciples in this examination. Below the stage, close to 1,000 Jadian disciples were gathered together. In the front row were the head elders of each branch. Serene looked at the stage, whispered to Tian Belize, "Xiao Fan looks a little nervous." Tian Belize snorted and did not speak. Under the gaze of everyone, how could he not see what his wife saw? Among the 4 people on the stage, Kevern was confident and at ease. Anan was cold like ice. Issa was standing with a smile. Only Shah Danan was standing there, staring at the ground, not knowing where to put his hands, very embarrassed. On the stage, Reverend Dao Xian looked at the 4 of them. A smile flashed across his lips. He turned to the audience and said, "Everyone, up until today, the 7 Peaks tournament has already decided on the top 4 disciples. They're all talented. Their skills are exquisite. They're all elites of Qingyun's sect. They shoulder the heavy responsibility of bringing glory to Qingyun's sect in the future." He was only halfway through his sentence. Suddenly, there was a burst of laughter coming from the audience. A moment later, the crowd of Qingyun disciples burst into laughter. Reverend Doyle Shun frowned, glanced at Shah Danan, who was the youngest among the 4, then shook his head. At this moment, the laughter continued. The solemn scene became a little funny. Master Vas Kalo's face turned cold, stepped forward, his eyes as sharp as knife, swept across the audience. The laughter in the crowd immediately quieted down. Wherever Master Vas Kalo's eyes landed, the laughter disappeared. After a while, the scene returned to peace. Vas Kalo had been in charge of Jadian's punishment for many years. His influence among the disciples was even higher than head Master Doyle Shun. After the scene had completely calmed down, Master Vas Kalo stepped back, said to Reverend Doyle Shun, "Head Shi Xiang, please." Master Doyle Shun smiled. "I have nothing to say." "Vas Kalo, should you go?" Master Vas Kalo nodded, turned to the audience, said loudly, "Tomorrow's contest, Dragon Head Peak Kevern against Peak of Wind Issa, Bamboo Height Anan against Bamboo Height Shah Danan." Vas Kalo was still talking. The eyes of the audience were focused on him. Shah Danan was relieved. Under the countless eyes, he almost couldn't breathe. "Why are you sweating so much?" Suddenly, Zhang Shushu whispered beside him. Shah Danan was surprised. Ever since he won against Peng Chong, Issa was always cold to him in front of others. He didn't expect he would talk to him first. Although they only knew each other for 3 days, Shah Danan already considered him as one of his good friends. He stole a glance at Zhang Shushu, only to see Zhang Shushu standing next to him with a straight face, looking straight ahead with a smile on his face. It was as if he hadn't spoken at all. "Idiot, don't turn your head." Issa's expression did not change. Only his lips moved, said, "You made me get scolded by my dad. Isn't that enough?" Shah Danan was apologetic, quickly moved his eyes away, whispered, "Sorry, at that time, Peng Shi Xiang is okay. Peng Shi Xiang's injury is serious, but nothing serious. He'll be fine after a few days of rest." Otherwise, why would I let you go? But I can't believe you hid your strength. No, sigh, I don't know what happened at that time. Most likely, Peng Shixiao let me win, and I was hot-headed and I asked Peng Shixiao. Although he lost, he praised you a lot. He said he used all his strength and did not let you win. You don't need to worry about it. Sha Danan was surprised again, then said, then what you said about being scolded by your father. It's all because of Senior Brother Gao and his group of idiots. They said what I said to Senior Brother Peng for you. Although Senior Brother Peng spoke up for me, he was still scolded by my father. Otherwise, I wouldn't have acted like that in front of others. Shushu, I'm really sorry. Just a small thing, not worth mentioning. I have been scolded by him since I was young. But your luck is really... But I think you need to be careful. The next match is against Bamboo Heights Ice Beauty. Be careful of Aeolian Firmus cutting you in half. Sha Danan's face was bitter, whispered. I know. It would be better if I can compete with you, Dash. Then he stopped. He and Issa felt a chill in their heart. They looked to their side and saw Ainan's cold eyes were staring at them. Sha Danan was silent. Issa also gasped. They did not dare to say anything. They pretended to be listening to Master Vasp Kalo's lecture on the stage. With great difficulty, Taoist Vasp Kalo finished speaking. The crowd dispersed and prepared for the grand competition tomorrow, which was about to reach its climax. Sha Danan and Issa left the stage. They still felt a chill on their back. They were speechless. Perhaps Ainan came from the Arctic ice plain. Just one look from her can make people's heart feel cold. He was about to say goodbye to Issa. He turned around and looked at Issa. Issa's face suddenly turned serious. His eyes were filled with contempt. Then he snorted with disdain, then proudly left. Not far away, surrounded by a group of Peak of Wind disciples, his father was looking at them. Sha Danan smiled bitterly, turned back to the Bamboo Peak disciples. Tian Belize looked at him, said, go back. Then he looked at Hede, said, Hede, come with me. Your mom and I have something to tell you. Hede answered, smiled at Sha Danan before she left. Everyone returned to their room. Inside the room, the Bamboo Peak people were in an uproar. Wu Dee and others were busy telling the good news to Xavion. Ladaxin picked Sha Danan up, laughing. Only Amanla was shaking his head, said, there is no justice. There is no justice. Chapter 49. Late night again. Sha Danan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Ash also opened its eyes wide, blinking at him. The other Shixiaos were already snoring loudly. Even Big Yellow was fast asleep on the ground. The moonlight was like water, shining in through the window and sprinkling on the ground like frost and snow. Sha Danan quietly got up. Ash immediately jumped into his arms. Sha Danan hugged it, patted its head, then walked outside. The corridor was quiet, and there was no sound. He smiled bitterly to himself. Since he arrived at Peak of Widows, he never had a good night's sleep. Thinking of the contest with Ainan tomorrow, his heart was still unspeakably nervous. At that moment, Ash in his arms suddenly moved uneasily. Sha Danan looked at it. Under the moonlight, Ash's clever eyes were looking at the shadow in front of them. In the darkness, a figure flashed by. Sha Danan's heart was moved. He followed. That figure didn't run very fast, and as he ran, his shoulders seemed to be constantly shaking, as if he was crying. Sha Danan recognized it was Hede. He was even more curious. At the same time, seeing his Shiji crying, there was an inexplicable sadness in his heart. Hede ran to the cloud sea, came to the center of the arena. Seeing there was no one around, she could not hold it anymore, squatted on the ground and cried. Sha Danan had never seen his Shiji so sad. His mind was blank. He slowly walked to her side, whispered, Shiji, you dash. Hede was surprised. She jumped up and turned around. Seeing it was Sha Danan, she was relieved. Then her heart turned sour again. She threw herself into Sha Danan's arms and cried loudly on his shoulder. Sha Danan's body stiffened. His entire body was petrified. He could not move anymore. Her sobbing echoed in his ears. He could feel the faint warmth from her body on his shoulder. It was like the scene in his dream really happened today. A faintly discernible fragrance wafted over. Sha Danan stood there, looking at the distance. Although he had countless thoughts to hug this woman, he did not. Perhaps if he really hugged her, his life will be different? At this time, Hede left his shoulder. Shah Danan's heart was empty. Vaguely, he felt he had lost something. His shoulders were wet with tears. Hede rubbed her red eyes, saw Shah Danan's shoulder was wet from her tears, blushed, said, "Sorry, Shao Fan." Shah Danan shook his head, said, "Shiji, what happened to you?" Tian Linger was about to speak when she heard something below her feet called out twice. She looked down and saw that it was Xiao Hui who had caught up. She quietly bent down and carried Xiao Hui in her arms. "Never, Xiao Fan, never." The woman stood in the moonlight, sad and beautiful. She said to Shah Danan with sadness, "Dad and Mom never scolded me like this." Looking at the beautiful face in sorrow, Shah Danan felt a tearing pain in his heart, as if all her sorrow was brought by him. He forced himself to calm down and said softly, "Senior sister, what's wrong? Why did Master and Shenyang scold you?" Hede hesitated for a moment, raised her head, and looked at Shah Danan. Since young, this Xiao Shidi was her closest playmate besides her parents. At this moment, in her heart, she seemed to have a thought. Since when did Xiao Fan Shidi start to be so gentle to me? However, this thought was just a flash. Her heart was filled with sorrow. Finally, she said to Shah Danan with a crying voice, "It is all because of Kevern's age." Shah Danan's face turned pale. He couldn't help but clench his fist. He clenched so tightly that his nails pierced into his palm. "You still don't know?" Once Hede opened her mouth, she no longer guarded against this Xiao Shidi. But Shah Danan was shouting wildly in his heart, I know, I already know." The cold moonlight shined on the world. "Kevern Xixiang and I love each other. I told them I really, really like him." Hede calmed down a little, but she did not notice. Every word she said, Shah Danan's face lost a little bit of color. "But Dad scolded me loudly, said I am not sensible. Even my mother, who always loved me, changed her face and stood on Dad's side. How could it be like this, Xiao Fan?" Shah Danan lowered his head, did not let Hede see his face, whispered, "How did Master and Shenyang know?" Hede was in a state of excitement. She did not notice the flaw in Shah Danan's words. Her lips flattened, almost cried again. "I also did not know. Later I found out. It was Bamboo Heights Bako Shiji and others who told Shui Yushur Shu. Then Shui Yushur Shu told my mother. I and Bako Shiji are so close, I have reminded them many times, but they still said it. Her eyes turned sour. The tears finally came out. Shah Danan said bitterly, "Perhaps Master and Shenyang did it for your own good. They are your parents. They will not treat you badly." Tian Linger wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes, loudly said, "What do they know? They only know that Kevern brother is Dragonhead Valley Vasp, Kalo Shirshu's favorite disciple. They only know that if Kevern brother and I are together, they will not be able to raise their heads in Jadian. They never thought about me." She said with a bit of sadness, anger, and determination, "Compared to my happiness, what is that? I really doubt whether they care more about their face or me, their daughter." Shah Danan suddenly raised his head, looked at this Shiji who suddenly became a stranger. What a sorrowful expression. Helplessness, like a bird who lost its parents standing alone in the wind and rain. Sadness with a trace of panic, like a knife piercing into his soul. Shah Danan was immediately defeated by that look. A sadness that he had never felt before rose in his heart. If he could bear the pain for this girl, no matter how difficult it is, he is willing to bear it. But he did not know what to say, only called quietly, "Shiji, I want to be with him," Hede said decisively. Instead of saying it to Shah Danan, it was better to say she was saying it to her heart, to Tian Belize and his wife who were not here. "I must be with Kevern Xixiang. We have made a solemn vow. No matter how father and mother oppose, even if the sea runs dry and the rocks crumble, we will be together." She looked at the night sky, swore to the moon. The cold moonlight quietly sprinkled on her body. She was as beautiful as a sorrowful lily blooming in the night, dazzling people with her beauty and making them forget the desolate and dead shadow beside her. Standing on the high ground, the rising sun shined on Shah Danan's body. It warmed his body, but not his heart. He stood on the stage expressionlessly, facing Anan, who was as beautiful as a fairy. The disdain in the icy woman's eyes was obvious. Everyone on the square knew that he had relied more on luck than strength to enter the top four. Behind her, Aeolian Firmus was glowing with a faint blue light. Shah Danon looked at the legendary divine object, lightly thought, after a while, will he be facing it? Then, he momentarily forgot about this question. Ever since he came back last night, his spirit had been fluctuating in a kind of trance. Above Cloud C, there were only 2 stages left. But the number of Jadian disciples watching the match between Kevern and Issa was less than 30%. Almost everyone was attracted by Anan and Shah Danon. Among the elders, including Master Doyle Shun, most of them were sitting under the stage. But when they saw Anan stepped on the stage, after a cheer, most of them were discussing whether Shah Danon would be defeated in a moment or a moment. Below the stage, Tion Belize frowned. Even though he knew Shah Danon's background, but hearing the scornful comments from the people behind him still made him uncomfortable. And Suru, who was sitting beside him, was looking around for her daughter. Last night, after the big quarrel, Tion Linger ran away crying, and this morning she had not been seen. As a mother, she understood her daughter. Most likely this stubborn daughter ran to Kaheo's arena. She shook her head. Although she loved her only daughter dearly, this time she was completely on her husband's side. Perhaps this was the instinct of a mother. She always felt that the people in Long Show Peak were not very good. She turned her head and looked at the stage. At the same time, Shah Danon also looked at her emotionlessly. Their eyes met. After a moment, Shah Danon looked at her side. It seemed like he could not find the person he was looking for. Then he turned his eyes back. Serene frowned, said to Tion Belize, Xiaofan's expression is not right today, like lifeless. Tion Belize said lightly, he is just nervous. Child never see the world, nothing strange. Serene quieted down, did not say anything. Shah Danon turned his eyes to Anan's face. Under the rising sun, her beautiful face was shining. Soon, Anan felt Shah Danon's eyes. The scornful look appeared in her eyes again. But this time, Shah Danon did not avoid it. He did not even feel the scornful look. That beautiful face was completely meaningless to him. Only in his heart, he murmured, she is not here. She went to watch Kevern's match. As smart as Anan was, she quickly found her opponent was only looking at her. But in his empty eyes, he was thinking about something else and completely ignored her existence. It was the first time in her life that she experienced this. There was a hint of surprise in her eyes. Dang! The bell and cauldron rang, echoed on Peak of Widows. Everyone quickly quieted down. Anan straightened up her body, took a deep breath. Just 2 more wins, just 2 more wins, then she can realize her dream and master's expectation. Aeolian Firmus was behind her. The blue light gradually brightened. Bamboo height, disciple Anan, please enlighten me. Shah Danon woke up from a dream. His first reaction was not to return the greeting, but to look down the stage with great expectation. There, the heads were moving, the eyes of thousands of people, but there was no figure of the person he wanted to see. Anan's expression changed. The Qingyun disciples below the stage were also in an uproar. This was the first person to be so rude to Anan. Tion Bui and Suru looked at each other. At the same time, both sensed there was really something wrong with this little disciple today. Shah Danon slowly turned his head. His face was ashen, said lightly, I am Bamboo Peak's Shah Danon. Shiji, please do not go easy on me. Anan startled. Although it was just polite words before the match, Shah Danon was very strange. Who would say something like, don't go easy on me? It sounded like sarcasm, but it did not look like it. But Anan was after all Master Shui Yu's favorite disciple. Her heart was firm. Her expression did not change. She did not say anything. She raised her right hand. Aeolian Firmus slowly rose behind her. Shah Danon watched the blue light become darker and darker, brighter and brighter. Even his body was color blue. But he could not find any nervousness. Instead, deep in his heart, he was expecting something. He took out the black and ugly fire stick. The audience roared with laughter. Compared to the majestic and noble Tinya on the opposite side, the fire stick was like an ugly worm on the ground. Chapter 50. And at this moment, it was still a dejected worm. The ice-cold feeling once again filled his body. For some reason, this fire stick seemed to be especially excited today, and the speed at which the ice-cold feeling moved was much faster than usual. Shah Danon even felt, if it was not because he was connected with the fire stick, if it was not because he was holding the fire stick, he would have already charged at Anan. No, it should not be for Lu Sweki, but for Tianya. That inexplicable feeling was like two enemies who had a deep grudge against each other. At this moment, Anan's face changed. The light of Aeolian Firmus was too bright. It seemed she also felt strange. But Shah Danon did not want to think about it. He looked at the beautiful lady in the blue light. He suddenly realized she was like Shiji, but Shiji was looking at him with cold eyes. On the stage, an unexpected thing happened. Shah Danon and Anan did not make any move. They just stared at each other, motionless. The audience was in an uproar as they discussed spiritedly. Lu Sweki abruptly woke up. Just now Tianya, which had always been connected to her spiritually, suddenly showed unusual movements which made her feel strange, but using her telekinesis to check Tianya, there was nothing strange, only that Tianya seemed to have a faint feeling of eagerness to give it a try. Feeling the strange eyes of the crowd, Anan frowned. She calmed herself down, snorted coldly, pushed all the thoughts out of her mind. With a light shout, Aeolian Firmus brightened with blue light, rose to the sky, but still did not unsheathe. Since the beginning of Seven Peaks tournament, Aeolian Firmus had become the focus of everyone. But until now, Anan had defeated all of her opponents without unsheathing her sword. This made people guess who could force her to unsheath her sword. At this moment, everyone guessed it must be the final battle. With Dragonhead Peak Kevern's cultivation, he could do it. The blue light shined on Shah Danon's face, but could not show any expression. The black fire stick glowed with faint green light, slowly left his hand, stopped in front of him. Although they had seen the fire stick before, but it was the first time for the Bamboo Peak people, including most of the spectators, to see Shah Danon casting magic. Amandla snorted, said, "If I did not see it with my own eyes, I will not believe the stupid Xiao Shidi 2 years ago can suddenly become a genius." On the stage, Anan's face was serious. Her incantation sign was held tight. Aeolian Firmus suddenly turned around, as fast as lightning, charged at Shah Danon with the momentum of splitting the mountain and sea. The fire stick immediately met with it. The green light collided with the blue light in midair. It did not seem to be afraid at all. The next moment, under everyone's stunned eyes, Shah Danon was unable to withstand a single attack. Like he was heavily injured, he flew backward. The fire stick lost its color, turned around in the air, and flew back to its master. Shah Danon's back hit the pillar of the stage, fell down. He spat out a mouthful of blood and landed on the fire stick. Then, without anyone noticing, Shah Danon's blood quickly soaked into the fire stick. Shah Danon's back hit the pillar of the stage, fell down. A mouthful of blood came out from his throat, sprinkled on the fire stick. Then, without anyone seeing, Shah Danon's blood quickly seeped into the fire stick. Aeolian Firmus was so powerful, everyone was stunned. Anan's face was as cold as frost. Without hesitation, blue light flashed. Aeolian Firmus mercilessly struck down in midair. At this moment, black gas suddenly rose from the fire stick. Especially at the tip of the stick, the green light brightened. Shah Danon slowly stood up with blood on his mouth. His face was pale, but his eyes were red. His face looked a bit ferocious. The fire stick charged at Aeolian Firmus again in the black gas and green light. Once the two espers touched each other in midair, they bounced off each other. Anan and Shah Danon were shocked. Blue and green lights flickered in midair, flying back and forth in the air. Everywhere they went, the originally extremely hard giant wood on the arena was scattered like paper scraps, and the deafening sound was like a thunderclap from a clear sky. The thousands of Qing Yun sect disciples who were spectating did not change their countenance. Since the start of the competition, there was never a match like today. The start was so intense. The scene was even more magnificent than today. In just a short while, the huge arena was almost destroyed by these two powerful magical weapons. Sha Danan and Anan were floating in midair. Anan held the incantation mark with both of her hands. Her posture was serious but cool, but Sha Danan was a bit strange. Although the power of the fire stick was beyond everyone's expectation, he did not hold the incantation mark like Anan. Instead, he was dancing in midair. The fire stick followed his will, as fast as lightning, fighting with Aeolian Firmus. Even so, Sha Danan's heart was suffering. The power of Aeolian Firmus was far beyond his imagination. Every time the fire stick and Aeolian Firmus collided, all of his meridians were shaken. If he did not secretly practice Sky Song Temple's Fallen Wisdom outside of pure essence, strengthen his meridians, and with Fallen Wisdom protecting him, he would have died already. But Anan did not feel anything strange. Under her control, the blue light of Aeolian Firmus was getting brighter and brighter. The power was getting stronger and stronger, gradually suppressed the green light and black gas of the fire stick. While Sha Danan was complaining, Anan was also surprised. Her opponent's normal-looking fire stick was able to resist against Aeolian Firmus spirit power, and also had a kind of suction force, constantly absorbing the spirit power and blood in her body. If her foundation was not strong, she would not be able to suppress the boiling blood in her body. Thinking of that, Lu Sweki felt a surge of blood in her heart. Her body floating in the air almost lost balance. She was furious and anxious from the situation of the fight. She instinctively discovered that her opponent's cultivation in Tai Chi Xinqing Wei was actually not very high, far below her, but for some reason, the power he used this strange magical weapon was so strong. Even Tianya could only gain the upper hand on the surface. Anan gritted her teeth. Her face turned angry. Her clothes fluttered without wind. After Aeolian Firmus and the fire stick hit heavily in midair, Sha Danan's body shook greatly. The fire stick also slowed down for a moment. Taking advantage of this moment, Aeolian Firmus flew back. Anan reached out her right hand and held Aeolian Firmus. The moment her jade-like palm and Tianya touched, in that instant thousands of blue lights swallowed her figure. Tianya's sword body shook, made a loud sound like a dragon's roar, rose up into the sky. Anan seemed to become one with Tianya, charged up into the sky, straight up into the blue sky. Sha Danan had already forgotten about anything else in his heart. He only felt the connection between him and the fire stick in midair was getting stronger. He even felt the fire stick was like a living creature. He was very excited. An inexplicable, murderous aura rushed into his brain. He roared to the sky in midair. The roar shook the world. The sky changed color. Black and green light rose into the sky. Fierce wind blew. The clouds boiled. Suddenly, the blue light flashed. A sharp roar came from far to near, from almost inaudible, quickly grew louder, until no one could hear any sound anymore. Thousands of beams of blue light merged into one, formed into a large pillar of light, and struck down. It was like it was going to cut Jadian Hill in half. Sha Danan's face twisted. Blood came out from all of his orifices, but there was no fear in his face. His eyes brightened. He also reached out his hand and caught the fire stick. The green light and black gas were like held in his hand, and met the blue pillar of light. Outside, the young Jadian disciples held their breath, stared straight at Sha Danan. None of them had any contempt for Sha Danan. Among the elders, their faces also changed. This duel was a battle of life and death. But why no one came out to stop it? Boom, like thunder in the horizon, exploded in the mortal world, as if the entire Tongtian peak shook violently. The blue light turned back. Anan appeared in the horizon, holding Tanya tightly, but blood slowly flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Below the stage, Master Shui suddenly stood up. In midair, Sha Danan could only hear the sound of the howling wind. His sight was blurred. The red blood almost covered his eyes. If he could hear the shouts from the outside, he would hear the exclamation of the bamboo peak disciples below him. Serene's lips lost their color. She looked at her disciple, who was almost covered in blood in midair. She quickly and quietly said to Tian Belize, "Bai, let Xiao Fan admit defeat. Let him admit defeat." Tiambalise's body shook, stared at midair, slowly shook his head. He could not feel the pain. Shah Danan suddenly had a thought in his mind. He even thought, after I die, will Shaji come to see me? Many years later, when she is living her happy life, will she forget about me? He wiped away the blood and water from the corner of his eyes. Anan felt pain all over her body. The blood in her body was conflicting in her shaken meridians, like it was going to break out of her body and charge toward the ferocious demon in the horrible green light and black gas. This is the moment of life and death. This is the moment of eternity. This beautiful lady stood proudly in the wind. Even though the wind was like a knife, she did not step back. She raised her head, looked at the sky. The wind suddenly stopped, froze in midair. The world, suddenly quiet, stopped at this moment. Boom! A deep roar came from the edge of the sky, echoed in the world. Lusweki flipped his hand and pulled out the Aeolian firmament sword. Immediately, the blue light in the sky disappeared, shrunk. Like a dragon sucking water, all of it was sucked into the autumn water like sword. On Peak of Widows, silence. The legendary Aeolian Firmus was finally unsheathed. Lusweki's face was as cold as frost, her hand holding the sword incantation. She actually took 7 steps in the 7-star position while floating in the air. Her long sword suddenly pierced the sky. Her beautiful face was without a trace of blood. She chanted an incantation, 9 heavens black blade, turn into divine thunder. The power of heaven, Li by sword. In an instant, the originally clear blue sky darkened. Dark clouds suddenly appeared on the horizon, and thunder rumbled. Lightning constantly flashed at the edge of the dark clouds. It was a scene of desolation, and a violent gale was stirred up. Shah Danan slightly opened his mouth. This scene seemed to have happened once in his memory. On the ground, from Reverend Daoxian to the various branches' head elders, everyone's faces were shocked, stood up together, and turned to look at small bamboo Valley Shuiwa master. After a while, Tian Balise said, "You have taught a good disciple." Master Shuiyu ignored everyone. Worry appeared on her indifferent face for the first time. She looked at the 2 people in the sky. Thunderblade, incantation. Master Doyleshin slowly took back his eyes. His heart was shocked. He could not imagine there was such a great talent among the young generation of Jadian. But, looking at the female disciple's face, although she tried her best to cast such powerful magic, her body was trembling. Her face was as white as paper. Most likely she was not able to do it. In the sky, the sound of thunder became more urgent. Shah Danan could clearly feel, since the moment Aeolian Firmus was unsheathed, the fire stick in his hand was filled with energy. It was like the esper that was connected with his own flesh and blood was shouting from the bottom of his heart. It was like it had been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years. The sky became darker. Dark clouds pressed down. A large whirlpool slowly appeared in the thick clouds. Chapter 51. It was like the passage to the netherworld. A bottomless whirlpool hung upside down in the sky. Like the devil of the netherworld opened its horrifying mouth, about to swallow everything in the world. The wind was piercingly cold, sweeping away the clouds. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed. Shah Danan flew in. The fire stick glowed with green light, very eye-catching under the dark clouds. Anan watched Shah Danan's figure wrapped in green light. Her face turned pale. Thunderblade is the most powerful incantation in Taoism. It can trigger the power of heaven and earth with the body of mortal. It can be imagined how much pressure Anan's body was under. Tina was a rare celestial weapon. Originally, it was a good weapon to use, celestial sword-wielding Thunder True formula. But compared to it, Anan's own cultivation was lacking. At this moment, she only felt that from the dark clouds in the sky, an infinite power was surging into her body like a raging wave. Her body didn't seem to have any changes, but the blood and chi in her body were surging, as if it was about to explode from this great power. If not for Tinya constantly absorbing the surging power, Lusweki would not have been able to hold on long ago. The wind whistled and thunder rumbled. She stood in the air. In her days, She almost thought that she was like a grass that was powerless in the wind. The next moment, she remembered what her master Shuei had said when she passed this strange technique to her. Shuei, your aptitude is so good that I have never seen anyone like you in my life. However, the power of this incantation is too great. Your cultivation is still shallow, although you can barely grasp it, but you must not carelessly cast it, or you will be killed. Boom! A clap of thunder seemed to explode in the sky above the heavenly peak. Everyone could vaguely feel the ground beneath their feet shake a little, as if the ancient thunder god had been disturbed from his slumber and was roaring furiously. Everyone's face changed. Shah Danon was now only 20 feet away from Anan. Looking at the power, anyone could tell that once Anan finished casting, he would be turned into ashes. However, his entire body suddenly tensed up as if he had hit a soft wall, and he couldn't move forward. Shah Danon's face was ashen at that moment. Thunderblade is one of Jade's most powerful incantation. How amazing it is! When casting, it will naturally create an invisible shield around the caster through the celestial weapon. Shah Danon could not move forward. The fire stick shined brighter, but could not move forward anymore. Perhaps in terms of spiritual power, Shah Danon's fire stick was not weaker than Aeolian Firmus, but in terms of cultivation, the difference was too big. He only used his own spiritual power to activate the fire stick. It could not compare to Anan's unparalleled incantation that was refined by Jadean's ancestors for thousands of years. But at this moment of despair, the huge vortex in the sky spun even faster, thunder and lightning striking, Tanya's celestial sword's light getting brighter and brighter. This exceptional celestial skill was about to be completed. Anan's body suddenly shook. Her originally snow-white face instantly flushed red. With a sound, she spat out a mouthful of blood, almost turning into a blood mist in front of her. Tanya's celestial sword's light immediately wavered, as if unstable. Anan clenched her teeth, closed her eyes, and focused all of her spiritual energy on Tanya. After a moment, Tanya's light stabilized and instead became even brighter than before, dazzling and dazzling, unable to be looked at directly. A loud bang came from the dark clouds. A beam of light appeared in the deepest part of the whirlpool. It was countless of lightning gathered into one, faintly facing against Aeolian Firmus in Anan's hand. But Anan's heart was filled with despair. In the sound of the wind, there was a sharp whistle. She used all her strength to protect Aeolian Firmus, but could not take care of the shield around her. Shah Danon was overjoyed. He and the fire stick turned into a green pillar of light, crossed the sky, and charged at the beautiful lady, swaying in the wind. Is that it? Is everything going to end here? Her heart suddenly calmed down. At that moment, she thought lightly. At this moment, in this short moment, the world was quiet and frozen. Everything was frozen in place. Only she stood in the wind, her clothes fluttering, her black hair swaying. She opened her closed eyes and looked at the green light that was speeding towards her. That moment was like an eternity. Shah Danon saw her, and her eyes. She stood alone in the wind and rain, facing the power of the world. She was so peaceful, but her face was slightly pale. There was a sadness in her eyes and a trace of panic. The wind and rain howled, the bleak world. This beautiful lady quietly looked at him. Whose eyes were that, sad and bleak, like last night? That person was hurt by love. That kind of pain, deep into the bone marrow, deep into the soul. Deep, deep. Is it you, the girl who loves someone else? You are so determined to miss him for the rest of your life? Shah Danon suddenly smiled, with a bit of sadness and dead heart, like last night. The fire stick melted into the light of Aeolian Firmus. No one could see their figures. They also could not see the light of the fire stick suddenly dimmed. At that moment, the sky rumbled. An enormous pillar of lightning fell from the sky, landed on Aeolian Firmus. The entire world, the gods and Buddhas at the same time, chanted together. The enormous pillar of light shot out from Aeolian Firmus, charged as Shah Danon with the power to destroy the world. At the moment of life and death, the fire stick rose into the sky, shielded in front of its master. The next moment, Sha Danon was swallowed by the light. For a long time, for a long time, for a long time, the dark clouds in the sky dispersed. The light disappeared. People stared at the sky in a daze, looking at the youngster who was holding a black fire stick tightly, like a rock that had been tortured and covered with scars, falling straight down. He did not fall to the ground. Tian Belize appeared under him like a ghost and caught him. Tian Belize's face was serious. He immediately opened the unconscious Sha Danon's mouth, took out a small bottle, poured the yellow pill into Sha Danon's mouth. The pill melted in his mouth. Tian Bui did not make a sound, leaped up. A red light immediately rose up, carrying him as fast as lightning. He did not look back at the scene. Looking at the direction, he was heading back to Big Bamboo Valley. Suru and the rest of the Big Bamboo Peak disciples also followed. At that moment, Anan landed with a pale face. She was immediately surrounded by the ecstatic Bamboo Peak people. Surrounded by her Shiji and Shimmy, she lifted her head without a word, watched the red light that was fading away in the sky, startled. It was like he slept in the darkness for thousands of years. He longed to wake up but could not open his eyes. In the endless darkness, he was alone. But he was not willing to walk alone in the darkness. But other than the darkness, there was no other way. Thus, he was filled with grief and indignation, and a raging fire burned in the depths of his heart. Thus, he made a solemn vow to the demon god of the netherworld. Even if his body and soul were turned into ashes, he would still light up this bit of light, even if he had to bury everything in the world with him. The evil energy from the ancient times was still as wild as before. Sha Danon slowly opened his eyes. The soft light shined into his eyes. The familiar smell of the house floated in this room. There seemed to be no one here. He slowly sat up. When he was about to wipe the sweat from his forehead, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, chest, and abdomen. He gasped. His face turned pale from the pain. He sat on the bed, did not dare to move. After a long time, the pain slowly faded away. It should be afternoon. The door was half closed. 2 windows were opened. He could vaguely see the green grass and bamboos in the yard. Ash and Big Yella, who always followed him, were gone. Could it be that they found meat bones again? He smiled. He smiled to himself in the empty room. Creak. The door was pushed open. The beautiful and dignified Serene came in. Sha Danon moved, called Shenyang. But before he got up, his face twitched again. Serene quickly sat on the bed, said softly, "Don't move, Xiao Fan." Sha Danon waited until the pain subsided, then said to Serene, "Disciple did not know Shenyang had come." Serene glared at him, said, "Half of your life is gone. You still have the mind to remember this. Don't talk nonsense, sit down." Sha Danon smiled embarrassedly. Serene examined him, nodded, said, "Your external wounds are almost healed, but the damage to your meridians is too heavy. You need a rest." Sha Danon said, "Yes, disciple let master and Shenyang lose face. That's right, Dash," Serene cut him off. "You should be the one who made your master proud. For nearly 300 years, except for the 7 Peaks tournament that your master participated in, there is no disciple who is better than you in Bamboo Peak." Sha Danon blushed, lowered his head. That is disciple's good luck." Suru smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Sha Danon remembered, said, "The contest is over." But when in the end, was it Lu Shiji? Serene shook her head, said, "No, it was Dragonhead Peak's Cavern." Sha Danon suddenly felt sour in his heart, said quietly, "So, it is Qi Shixiao, he is really powerful. Even Lu Shiji, who has Aeolian Firmus, was defeated by him." Suru heard him and seemed to be touched, quietly sighed, diverted the topic. "Your injuries this time are not light. Your teacher had spent a lot of effort to treat you." Heard from him, using the Tianya Celestial Sword to use the Celestial Sword Wield Thunder True formula. Although Lu Sweki's cultivation is not high enough, but if not for your burn, your magical weapon that blocked for you, even deities would not be able to save you. Sha Danon heard her words and suddenly remembered. He looked around, but could not find the ugly black fire stick. Suru looked at his expression and lightly said, "Your artifact was taken by your master." Sha Danon, startled, whispered, "Yes." Then he couldn't help but ask, Master, he elder, Serene said, you were unconscious for 5 days and 5 nights. Until last night your condition was stabilized. This morning, Peak of Widows Shixiang sent a message to ask your master to go there. He should be at Peak of Widows right now. Sha Danan slowly nodded. He did not know what to feel. He felt there should be no problem, but it was the first time the fire stick left him. He felt a little bit lost. Chapter 52. Serene looked at him. A strange look flashed across her eyes, but still said, you just woke up. Don't be too tired. Need to rest more. I have ordered them not to disturb you. Just ask Bishu to bring your 3 meals. Sha Danan said, thank you, Shenyang. Serene nodded. Then you rest. I will ask Bishu to bring the meals. Then she turned around and walked outside. Just when she was about to leave the room, she suddenly heard Sha Danan call from behind, Shenyang. Serene turned and said, what? Sha Danan looked at her, hesitated for a moment, then said, Shenyang, I want to ask, do you know the result of Bei's contest from Dragonhead Peak? I was at Peak of Widows at that time. I really didn't have time to ask him. Serene looked at him again, said, he entered top 8, but lost to fellow sect senior brother Kaheo. Sha Danan, startled, said, so he also. Thank you, Shenyang. Serene shook her head, said, you rest. Then she turned and walked out. Sha Danan slowly lay down, looked at the ceiling of the room, silent. Mount Jadian, Peak of Widows, inside Crystal Hall. Master Doyle Shun sat in the middle. The other heads of the 6 houses were also present. Besides them, there was no one else in the hall. Everyone was silent. Reverend Daoxian lowered his eyes, looking at the black fire stick in his hand. Tian Shitty, Master Doyle Shun broke the silence, said, what do you think? Tian Belize was silent for a moment, said, when Sha Danan came to the mountain, he did not have this item. Most likely he found this treasure by chance. Master Vasp Kalos said, coldly, this stick can fight against Aeolian Firmus. It is already a divine weapon. But looking at the world, I have never heard of such a treasure. Tian Bai's face darkened, coldly said, the divine continent is vast. How vast is it? I don't know how many rare treasures there are. You and I at best are just frogs at the bottom of a well. Anger flashed across Taoist Song Song's face, but before he could react, Small Bamboo Valley's Shuiwa master coldly said, we are naturally the frogs at the bottom of the well, but when this black stick is casting the spell, the evil energy is billowing. Obviously, it is an evil object. I don't know why Tian's senior brother could not see it. Tian Belize snorted, said, emitting some black gas is evil energy? Are some red strands evil? If that's the case, I'll go back and paint my face black. Won't you all think I'm a sorcerer of the devil cult and behead me? Reverend Daoxian frowned, said, Tian Shitty, don't talk like that. How can you say that you are an evil sex sorcerer without any rhyme or reason? Tian Belize snorted, turned his head away, and didn't say anything. Reverend Daoxian sighed, put the fire stick on the tea table, said, today the reason I invited everyone here is to discuss. First, in this 7 Peaks tournament, Bamboo Peak disciple Sha Danan has a strange esper, unknown origin but extremely powerful. Second, we had discussed to send the first 4 disciples to Kongsang Mountain Cave of Fangs to investigate. The other 3 have no objection, only this Sha Danan. The more Tian Belize heard, the angrier he got. Originally, he was also confused about Sha Danan's sudden increase in cultivation, also suspicious about the fire stick. But in this crystal hall, not to mention others, but to pick on his own disciple, how could he not be angry? His face darkened, stood up, shouted, Head Shixiang, what do you want? Reverend Daoxian did not expect Tian Bui to have such a big reaction, was shocked. Everyone looked sideways. Sitting beside Tian Bui, Return of the Wind Valley head Sang Shuchang, who had always been on good terms with him, pulled Tian by his sleeve, said, Bui, sect head senior brother did not say anything. You sit down first. Reverend Daoxian's face darkened, said, Tian Shitty, this matter is a bit strange. As the head of the faction, I will handle it impartially. Don't worry. Tian Belize's face was still angry, but after seeing Reverend Daoxian's face and Sing Shuchang's persuasion, he finally sat down. Reverend Daoxian slowly said, Everyone, you all have seen this stick. It looks normal, but inside it is evil. But the most important thing is that even with our cultivation, we can't control it. Instead, it's a little disciple who's only at the 4th level of the Yu Qing realm who can control it. Everyone, including Tian Belize, was silent. They were all top cultivators. How could they not know this? But no one was willing to say it out. Finally, it was Reverend Daoxian who said, "From what I see, this black stick is most likely a blood-refined item." Even though they were mentally prepared, but the faces of the heads still changed slightly. The so-called blood-refined item was to use the person's own blood to refine the treasure. This kind of strange technique, not only was the method strange and dangerous, the material of the esper was even more stringent, 1 in 10,000, and the refining process was extremely dangerous. If one was not careful, the esper's evil blood would backfire, and the death would be unspeakable. Of course, if it was successful, then the power of the magical treasure would be unparalleled. Another advantage was that the treasure was connected to the owner's blood and qi. Unless the owner had the blood of the person who created it, no one else could use it. However, because it used blood as a guide, it often had a murderous aura. Legend said that this blood-refined method was passed down from the ancient demon. Since ancient times, it was passed down from generation to generation among the evil faction evil people. But there was never any famous blood-refined esper, most likely because this method was too dangerous. Even the evil faction people did not dare to try it. But now, such esper appeared on a young disciple of Jadian. Reverend Doyle Shun looked at Tian Belize. Tian Belize's face was pale. He slowly stood up, said, "Shi Xiang, what you said may be reasonable, but I still have to say, Sha Danan is only 16. How could he know this blood-refined method? Since he came to the mountain, he never left the mountain for 5 years. When he came here, he did not have anything with him. Where could he find this rare material of the esper?" Master Vasp Kalo suddenly said coldly, "Perhaps he is from an evil faction, deliberately planted into our Jadian. It is not surprising." Tian Belize was angry, said, "If he really is that cunning, why would he use this item in 7 Peaks tournament in front of thousands of people? Also, if he really is a Falcon spy, haha, Vasp Kalo Shixiao, your disciple Bei is also not clean." Master Vasp Kalo got hurt. He stood up and said angrily, "What did you say? How can Jingyu be compared with your stupid disciple?" Tian Belize's face was even darker. He snorted, looked at Vasp Kalo, said, "Yes, my disciple is stupid, but I heard he entered top 4. I wonder what is the result of Vasp Kalo Shixiang's disciple Bei." Vasp Kalo said angrily, "His luck is not good. He met his Shixiang cavern. If not, how could not enter top 4? Then he laughed coldly. "Anyway, he is not as lucky as someone. All the way up, he got in the next round because others gave up, and he still dared to talk big." Tian Belize said loudly, "So that match between him and Anan was also luck?" Master Vasp Kalo answered, "That's right, because it was not luck he lost, and lost so badly. He almost lost his life." Tian Belize was getting angrier. His tongue was not very nimble. He could not win against Vasp Kalo, but the anger in his heart grew. His face flushed, angrily said, "What do you want? Do you also want to see if I'm not worthy of my reputation?" Master Vasp Kalo had no intention of backing down, immediately stood up, proudly said, "Then let me experience Tian Shixiao's crimson ray celestial sword." Tian Belize did not speak, stepped forward. His right hand already held the sword incantation. In the main hall, the air suddenly seemed to solidify. "Presumptuous!" A loud sound. It was Master Doyle Shun who slammed his palm on the tea table. His face full of anger, stood up. "You two think I, the head, am dead?" Doyle Shun had been the head for almost 300 years. He was highly respected, although he was usually amiable. But this time he was angry. Tian Belize and Master Vasp Kalo were shocked. Their hearts shook, then stepped back, quietly said, "Yes, Head Shixiang, please calm down." Master Doyle Shun looked at these heads, the anger on his face after a long while, then slowly faded, said, "Tian Shitty." Tian Belize took a step forward, said, "Head Shixiang." Master Doyle Shun looked at him, said, "No matter what, This black stick has a strange origin. If it really belongs to Falcon, then Shah Danon is related to Falcon. We cannot tolerate him. Do you know? Tion Belize slightly lowered his head, silent for a long time, then said, "Yes." Master Doyle Sean said again, "Tion Shitty, I know you're not feeling well, but it is a big matter. We must be careful. You go back first, wait until Shah Danon gets better, then interrogate him carefully, then bring him here. We will discuss again. What do you think?" Tion Belize's face turned red and white, suddenly stamped his foot, nodded, without saying a word, turned and walked out. A whistling sound came from outside. Most likely it was flying on his sword. In the main hall, Tseng Shuchong spoke to Reverend Dao Xian, sect head senior brother. Tian Bui senior brother's Big Bamboo Valley has a rare talent, but such a thing happened. Naturally, he is not happy. Please do not take it to heart. Master Doyle Shun sighed, shook his head. Of course I will not take it to heart. I know Tion Shitty's character. He is trustworthy. Then, he seemed to remember something, turned to Bamboo Heights Master Shueyu, said, "Shueyu Shimmy, these days your female disciple Anan." Shueyu said lightly, "Thanks for Shi Xiao's concern. Anan has mostly recovered. If it weren't for Tian Belize, Shi Xiao's disciple producing the kind of strange person and strange treasure, which consumed more than half of Xueqi's Yuan Qi, she wouldn't have lost to others." Vast Kalo's face changed, but Master Doyleshin already waved his hand. It is all in the past. Don't bother about it anymore." Song and Shueyu glared at each other and turned away. Master Daoxian saw this and sighed in his heart. His gaze involuntarily shifted to the tea table beside him, only to see that black and ugly-looking fire stick quietly lying on the tea table. Chapter 53. Big Yellow was lying on the ground, eyes closed, tail wagging. Ash was lying on his bed, a pair of bright eyes looking at the haggard Shah Danon. Shah Danon glared at it, said angrily, "What are you looking at?" Ash naturally would not speak human language to Shah Danon, but it squeaked twice. Looking at its monkey face, its master was injured, but it did not show any worry. Instead, it seemed to be taking pleasure in Shah Danon's misfortune. Shah Danon was a little annoyed, said impatiently, "Go, go, go, go to the side." Then the sound of footsteps came. Before he entered the door, Shah Danon already heard it, smiled. "Six Shi Xiao, why did you bring food so early today?" His voice suddenly stopped. Tian Belize's short and fat body slowly walked in from the door. Shah Danon was surprised. These days, Serene only told him to rest. The other Shi Xiangs, including Hidi, only came to see him once. The rest of the time, only Amandla brought him food 3 times a day. He did not expect Tian Belize would suddenly appear. He was stunned on the bed for a moment, then suddenly realized, quickly got up and saluted. Tian Belize's face was uncertain, waved his hand, said, "Never mind." Shah Danon answered, stood up, and stood at the side. Watching Tian Belize came and sat next to the table, he did not dare to breathe. Tian Belize looked at his disciple. From his reaction, this little disciple did not look like a genius. Instead, he seemed to be a little worse than normal people, but still. Tian Belize shook his head, sighed, said, "Seventh, come sit down." Shah Danon was surprised again. Tian Belize had always been harsh to him. Today he was kind to him. Shah Danon could not believe his ears. Tian Belize waited for a moment, but saw Shah Danon was looking at him suspiciously, like he did not react. He was angry again, said, "Do you want me to invite you to sit down?" His scolding was full of vigor. Shah Danon immediately found the majestic feeling of his master. He immediately reacted and obediently sat down. Tian Belize looked at him, choked, looked at him again, then laughed bitterly, shook his head, said, "Where's your body?" Shah Danon said respectfully, "Master, after coming back from Peak of Widows, thanks to Master and Shenyang's treatment and all Shi Xiang's care, I am almost recovered." Tian Belize looked at him, said lightly, "Seven Peaks tournament has passed for more than a month. It seems you have recovered. I have a few questions to ask you now." Shah Danon's heart sank, faintly felt the thing he was afraid of had finally come. But since it was in front of him, he could only say, "Yes, Master, please tell me." Tian Belize slowly said, "That black stick of yours, where did it come from?" Shah Danan's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Tion Belize. Tion Belize was also staring at him. His face was still calm, but his eyes were shining with divine light. He was not angry, but he was not angry. At that moment, thousands of thoughts turned in his mind. He could not make a sound. Tion Belize's face darkened. Extremely ugly. Said again, "Say it." Shah Danan was urged by him. Sweat appeared on his forehead. Although he did not have much knowledge, but many years ago in the deep valley, the sinister orb and the strange black stick unexpectedly fused together. After all, it was too strange. Moreover, it was dangerous and also had the ability to suck blood. He already knew this when he talked with his Shixiangs. It would not be tolerated by the righteous. If Tion Belize knew the truth, the consequences would be unthinkable. Other than that, in the depths of his heart, there was still one more thing. It had always been a deep taboo, especially after he knew that Puji monk was Tian'in Temple for great holy monks, and again thinking of that set of incantations that he taught himself. At that moment, he had made up his mind. No matter what, he could not say anything about Posey, not even a little bit about him. Tion Belize stared at him. Shah Danan stood up under that threatening gaze, then kneeled down again. "Master!" Tion Belize frowned, snorted, said coldly, "Say it." Shah Danan lowered his head, said slowly, "That black stick, a few years ago when Shiji and I went to the deep valley at the back of the mountain, we got it by accident." Tion Bui was slightly surprised, and then recalled, 2 years ago, it was true, Tion Linger went into that secluded valley and fainted for no reason. Suru went to check, but there was nothing unusual. Afterwards, he also went to check. It was indeed so. It was a little mystery, but as time passed, he forgot about it. Now it seemed it was most likely because of this black stick. But a black stick without anyone using it could make Hidi faint. How could Shah Danan use it? What kind of evil thing was that? Tion Belize thought of this. The doubt in his heart became bigger and bigger, asked, "How did you get it?" Shah Danan did not dare to raise his head, afraid to let Tion Belize see the expression on his face. He was not a clever person, and now he was very anxious. He could not think of any good excuse to explain. Tion Belize saw him hesitating. He was very experienced, immediately shouted, "Speak." Shah Danan was scared. Sweat poured down. His heart beat wildly, did not dare to hide anymore. Finally told him what happened that day. But in this, when the words were about to come out of his mouth, he forcefully took back the sinister orb. He only said that day in the deep valley he saw the black stick, picked it up out of curiosity, and the result was that the black stick sucked out his blood. Actually, it was because of sinister orb he felt nauseous, then he fainted. Before he fainted, he vaguely saw the black stick sucked his blood into the stick. After he finished, he did not even dare to raise his head, did not dare to look at Tion Bui again. Tion Bui instead frowned and fell in a deep thought. Looks like this little disciple did not seem to be lying. Those kinds of magical weapons and abilities were definitely not something that he could fabricate, but this kind of strange magical weapon, even in his life, it was also the first time he had heard of it. If there was something similar to this black stick, most likely it would only be the evil sect's great ominous object, sinister orb 1,000 years ago. But obviously, this black stick and sinister orb are definitely different. Tion Belize stood up, paced back and forth in the room, pondered for a while, then turned to Shah Danan and said, "You stand up first." Shah Danan answered in a low voice, stood up, but his head was still lowered, standing at the side. "But even so, that esper is connected with your blood. It is a blood-refined object." Shah Danan surprised. "Master, what is blood-refined object?" Tion Belize startled, then impatiently said, "If you don't know, then it's fine. I will ask you. Just listen carefully." Shah Danan immediately lowered his head, whispered, "Yes." Tion Belize looked at him, said, "Even if that black stick is a rare esper, but no matter what, you must at least cultivate to pure essences you Qing 4th level to be able to use it." Shah Danan's face changed. Tion Belize slowly said, "That day at Peak of Widows, I already asked you. Today I will ask you again, who secretly taught you incantation?" Shah Danan's body shook. He knew he was already in big trouble because of this unknown black stick. If adding the matter of secretly learning incantation The punishment waiting for him would be unimaginable. Just that at this moment, Tian Linger's appearance seemed to float before his eyes. The figure when they were young, when she brought him up the mountain to chop bamboo. Her gentle face beside the lone lamp in the rainy night. And in the past, when they joked and scolded and ran at the top of Big Bamboo Peak, even that faint fragrance of her body that floated in his memory. Right now, it was so clear. Bit by bit, floated into his heart. He knelt down again, heavily kowtowed, but did not say a word. He crouched on the ground, motionless. His body, which had just recovered from his injuries, had a bit of strength, but he looked a bit miserable. Tian Belize deeply looked at him. After a while, suddenly let out a long sigh, said, "Get up, follow me to Peak of Widows. As for whether you can come back alive or not, that depends on your luck." Chapter 54. Deep in the clouds, divine energy lingered. Everything was calm and peaceful, like the fairyland in people's dream. Mount Jadian, Peak of Widows, Crystal Hall. The 7 heads of Jadian were all here. Their eyes were looking at the young man kneeling in the hall. Master Doyle Shun looked at Shah Danon, who was kneeling there. His mind couldn't help but recall the 2 children who were rescued 5 years ago. White clouds changed into dogs. The world changed. It was like they had grown up in a blink of an eye. He sighed in his heart. His eyes left Shah Danon, said to the other heads, "Everyone, what Shah Danon said, what do you think?" Everyone was silent. After a while, suddenly Master Vas Kalo's voice rose, said decisively, "This boy's words cannot be trusted." Shah Danon's body trembled, but he did not raise his head. Master Doyle Shun frowned, said, "Vasp Kalo Shitty, why are you so sure?" Master Vas Kalo looked at Shah Danon, said, "The method of blood refining is evil and vicious. If not for the Falcon heretic teaching him, how could he have such knowledge to create such esper? So this person must be a Falcon spy. His life cannot be spared." Vas Kalo was always in charge of Jadian's punishment. His position was high and powerful. His tone was firm and firm. Shah Danon's face lost all color, almost couldn't breathe. No one made a sound, but Tian Bai's face darkened, slowly said, "If he really schemed to infiltrate our Qingyan sect like what you said, then why would he purposely use his esper in front of everyone?" Master Vasp Kalo snorted, said, "Falcon heretics' behavior is hard to guess. They have evil intentions. It is not strange for them to do some strange things." Tian Belize said angrily, "Aren't you being far-fetched, twisting logic?" Master Vas Kalo said coldly, "I am twisting logic? May I ask Tian Shixiang, does this method of blood refining belong to the righteous?" Tian Bui was speechless, his face flushed. Right now, anyone could see Tian Bui was still standing on his disciple's side. At this awkward moment, suddenly a cold voice was heard. It was Small Bamboo Valley's head, Shuiwa Master. "May I ask Vas Kalo Shixiang, you said the method of blood refining is evil and vicious. May I ask, how evil and vicious is it?" Master Vas Kalo was about to say something, but then stopped, said, "Falcon witchcraft. Need to say more?" Shui Yu said coldly, "So, Vas Kalo Shixiang also knows nothing about the blood refinement method. Why you think this method is evil and vicious and want to kill this young man?" Taoist Song Song looked at Shuiwa Master, his eyes bright, imposing manner imposing, said, "Oh, Shuiwa Shimmy, then what do you mean?" Shuiwa Master faintly said, "Senior brothers, the matter here, firstly we do not know much about blood refinement method, although we have heard, but most of it is conjecture if the so-called blood refinement method really has such a coincidental matter. Won't we be killing innocent people by mistake?" Shi Xiang, Chun, Master, of Master R, Master, Master, Tu, Tu Hua, Master, I Hua, Master, Master. Master Vasp Kalo squinted his eyes, but a sharp glint appeared in his eyes, said, "Why is Shuei Shimmy so different today, strongly defending this young man?" Anger flashed past Master Shuei Yu's pretty face. She said, "I am just stating the facts, not like some people who can't bear to see a talent from another branch, afraid that it will threaten their position, so they grab hold of some small things to kill, inhumane." In terms of sharpness of tongue, among the 7 seated, There were 6 males, but none could compare to Shui Wen Master. Taoist Song Song was so angry that his face turned pale, abruptly stood up. Master Doyle Shin quickly interrupted, said, all right, why are we quarreling again? Sit down, sit down. Master Vas Kalo did not dare to ignore Sect Head's words. He could only bitterly sit back down. On the other hand, Master Shui Yu was nonchalant, sitting upright on her chair. Master Doyle Shun shook his head, turned to the others, said, everyone, what do you mean? The heads of the other houses were silent for a while. Then head of Peak of Wind, Sing Shu Chong, said, head, I think Shui West Shimmy is right. This young man has a clean background, never left the mountains since he joined the sect. I am afraid it is really a coincidence that he found this treasure. It is Jadian's fortune. Master Doyle Shun stroked his beard, nodded, then turned to Master Sky Cloud. Sky Cloud looked at Vas Kalo, said, I agree with Vas Kalo Shixiang's way of doing this. Master Vas Kalo got an ally, nodded to Master Sky Cloud. In the end, only Rising Sun Peak's head, Shang Zhongliang, was left. He looked at Tian Belize and the rest, then looked at Taoist Vas Kalo and Taoist Tian Yun, and finally glanced at Reverend Doyle Shen from the corner of his eyes. After a slight hesitation, he said, I think Shui West Shimmy is right. Tian Belize's face relaxed, but Master Vas Kalo snorted. Master Doyle Shen nodded. Since everyone said so, I will not be polite. Then he turned to Sha Danan, who was still kneeling on the ground, said, Xiao Fan, stand up first. Sha Danan's body shook. He raised his head and looked at the masters, then slowly stood up. Master Doyle Shin looked at him like he wanted to see him clearly, then said to the other masters, everyone, actually I also think Sha Danan is not a falcon. Although this black stick has a murderous aura, it is contained within, unlike the ferocious objects of the evil cult that we have seen in the past, which are full of murderous aura and reveal their ferocious appearance. Master Vas Kalo felt something was wrong. He couldn't help but shouted, Head Shi Xiang, falcon heretics are vicious and dangerous. It is better to kill the wrong person than to let it go. Master Doyle Shun's face changed, looked at him, shouted, Vas Kalo Shitty, do you know what you are saying? Vas Kalo knew he said something wrong. He lowered his head and said nothing. Master Doyle Shun's face was serious, but his tone turned low, said slowly, Vas Kalo Shitty, you have been in charge of our faction's punishment for 200 years. You are fair and strict. I admire you very much. But I see for these years, your evil energy is getting heavier, your murderous nature is getting stronger. I am very worried, do you know? Master Vas Kalo said quietly, Yes, Shi Xiang. Master Doyle Shun sternly said, It is better to kill the wrong person than to let it go. That is what Falcon do. Our Jadian is a righteous faction, always open and above board. If something happens, we would rather let it go than to kill the wrong person. Otherwise, what is the difference between us and Falcon? Vasp Kalo Shitty. Although your cultivation is deep, you still need to cultivate Tao and understand Tao. Master Vas Kalo raised his palm, said, Thank you Shi Xiang for your advice. Vas Kalo is enlightened. Master Doyle Shun's face relaxed, said, It is good that you know. Then he turned to the others. They all said, Head Shi Xiang can make the decision. Master Doyle Shun nodded, said to Sha Danan, You heard it? Sha Danan was touched, quickly said, Yes, thank you. Thank you Sherbua and Shershu. Then he turned to Tian Belize, his voice was choked, said, Thank you, Master. Tian Belize waved his hand, did not say anything. Master Doyle Shin picked up the short black stick on the tea table and tossed it to Sha Danan, smiled. Only you can use this thing. Take it back. Sha Danan caught it. He immediately felt the familiar and cold energy rose and spread through his body. It was like there was an indescribable joy in it. He bowed to Master Doyle Shan, said, Thank you, Head Sherbua. Reverend Daoxian smiled, clapped his hands 3 times. Immediately a Taoist boy came over. Reverend Daoxian gave a few instructions. The Taoist boy nodded his head in acknowledgement and walked out. Not long after he led 3 people in. Sha Danan looked at them. They were all people he knew. Kevin and Issa were walking in front. Issa made a face at Sha Danan when his dad, Tseng Shu Chong, was not paying attention. As for the last one, it was a cold and beautiful lady. It was small bamboo valley Lusweki. These three people and Sha Danan were the top 4 disciples of Jadian's 7 Peaks tournament. Chapter 55. Kevern and Issa saw Sha Danan was here. They more or less smiled and greeted him. Only Anan was still indifferent, but her eyes still glanced at him. There seemed to be some unknown emotion flashed in her eyes, but it disappeared immediately. Master Doyleshun looked at the 4 people, smiled. Today I let you 4 here is to let you leave the mountain and gain some experience. Kevern and others were all moved. Master Doyleshun told them about Cave of Fangs at Kongsing Mountain, then said, This matter is very important. You 4 are the elites of my faction, so I sent you to investigate. But the Falcon heretics are cunning and cruel. You must be careful. The 4 said together, Yes. Reverend Daoxian nodded his head and said, Other than that, other than our Qingyan sect, Funxiang Valley and Tianyin Temple have also sent out outstanding disciples to investigate together. You all must not be disrespectful in front of others, but you must not ruin our Qingyun sect's imposing manner. Besides, Xiao Shixiang Xiao Yikai has already gone to Kongsing Mountain to investigate. If you can find him, you could discuss with him. The 4 looked at each other, then agreed. Master Doyle Shin carefully looked at the 4 young disciples. Then his eyes landed on Kevern. He waved his hand. Kevern, come here. Kevern startled, then walked forward. Master Doyleshun looked at him, then turned to Master Vaskalo, smiled. Shitty, your Dragonhead Peak has a successor. Master Vaskalo's face was not good from the beginning. Now he finally smiled. Xixiang is joking. Master Doyleshun smiled and took out something from his pocket, gave it to Kevern, said, Take it. Kevern took a look. It was a small mirror, simple shape, bronze edge, dragon on top, tiger on bottom. 8 trigrams were carved on the mirror. The middle part of the mirror was not a normal bronze mirror. It was misty yellow and could not be seen clearly. Before Kevern could react, Master Vaskalo was already beaming with joy, shouted, Silly boy, what are you waiting for? Kneel down and thank me. Kevern immediately realized that this inconspicuous object in his hand was most likely the magical treasure, Union Mirror. He quickly kneeled down and said, Thank you, Sect Leader Sherbois. Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, No need, get up. Then he turned to the others and said, All of you go out first. Everyone knew that he was going to teach Kevern the secret of the 6 Harmonies mirror, so they left together. Sha Danan walked to the side with Tian Belize. Tian Belize looked at him, said lightly, You have a heavy responsibility now. Don't go back to Bamboo Peak. Go down the mountain with the 3 of them. I will talk to Bamboo Peak for you. Sha Danan was surprised, then lowered his head, whispered, Yes, master. Tian Belize said, In this month of your recuperation, I heard that your Shenyang taught you some imperial sword techniques and Dao techniques. Have you memorized them? Sha Danan nodded. Yes, disciple will remember. Tian Belize turned around, said slowly, That's good. Although your talent is not good, but you're still a disciple of Bamboo Peak. Don't embarrass me when you go out. Sha Danan immediately said, Yes, master, disciple will not embarrass you. Tian Belize snorted. Sha Danan could not see his face. He did not know what his expression was, but from his voice, there was no anger. After a while, Tian Belize sighed, turned around, and looked at Sha Danan. He did not say anything, waved his hand as a greeting, then summoned his sword and flew away. Sha Danan stared at his master's figure, turned into a beam of red light, and disappeared into the sky. Then someone patted his shoulder. He was surprised and quickly turned around. It was the smiling Issa. Then he looked around. The heads of other houses had already left. Only 2 of them and Anan, who was standing alone at a distance. Zhang Shushu laughed and said, Count yourself lucky. I was worried that you wouldn't be able to pass this time. Sha Danan felt much more relaxed when he was with him. He smiled. Yeah, I was also scared to death. Zhang Shushu patted his shoulder, looked around him, and quietly said, Why didn't you bring Xiao Hui along? Sha Danan said with a bitter face, I was brought by Master early in the morning. I did not expect to leave the mountain immediately. I did not bring anything. How could I bring ash? Zhang Shushu smiled and said, "It's okay. I can lend you the clothes, or we can buy them when we go down the mountain to Hyang City." Then he winked at Sha Dan and whispered, "Anyway, we're going to earn this time." Sha Danon did not understand, said, "What?" Issa's eyebrows twitched, peeked behind him, laughed. "There's a beauty with you." Sha Danon was angry and funny at the same time, but he still looked at Anan. At the same time, it seemed Anan also felt it and looked at him. They looked at each other from far away. Sha Danon felt her eyes were like frost. He was surprised and quickly moved his eyes away. They talked and laughed for a while. When Issa was whispering to him about traveling with Anan, he suddenly found Sha Danon's smiling face stiffened. His eyes became straight, staring behind him. Issa was puzzled. He turned around and saw at the bottom of the stairs a man was staggering up. He was about 40 years old. His clothes were clean, but his face was blank. His eyes were dull. His mouth said something that did not follow up. "It's raining, the sky is dark. Smelly. Mother. Gods, gods. Under the gaze of Issa and Anan, Sha Danon walked toward them. He walked very slowly. After a long time, he reached the man. Like, he came back to the past. "Uncle Wong, are you okay?" He tried to suppress his excitement, said quietly. That man did not seem to notice Sha Danon at all. His mouth was still murmuring. Then he left Sha Danon and disappeared behind the hall. "Who is he?" Zhang Shushu walked to his side and asked. Sha Danon looked at the place where Uncle Wong disappeared, said sadly, "A madman." Seeing his expression, Zhang Shushu tactfully stopped asking. After a while, a cheerful Kevern walked out of the hall and greeted the three of them. Sha Danon absent-mindedly walked with Issa. After a discussion, Sha Danon was lost in thought, did not say a word. They decided to go down the mountain to Sunstream first. Issa smiled and asked Kevern, "Chi Shi Xiang, is the Union Mirror that head Sherbua taught you powerful?" Kevern smiled. "Union Mirror is our Jadian's treasure. Of course, it is powerful. But my cultivation is not enough." Well, this is the top of the mountain. Except for the heads of the 7 houses, other disciples cannot use sword. We will go down a cloud sea and fly to Sunstream from there." Anan was expressionless. Sha Danon nodded blankly. Only Issa was smiling. It seemed descending the mountain was a happy thing for a fun person like him. From Jadian to Sunstream. Along the way, Jadian's foremost outstanding disciples were riding on their swords. Other people were relaxed, but Sha Danon found it a little difficult. He had been recovering for a month. Serene seemed to have expected him to be fine. She taught him some Jadian incantations, and also taught him how to use the Esper to fly in the air. It was actually very simple. As long as his cultivation is deep enough and the Esper is not too bad, he can use Jadian incantations and telekinesis to drive the Esper. But Sha Danon's cultivation was not deep enough. His Esper was not bad, but it was very strange. He was unfamiliar with the newly learned Jadian incantations. It was very troublesome to use it. Sura didn't expect him to leave the peak of Tong Tian immediately. She wanted him to memorize the incantation and practice it when he returned to Big Bamboo Peak. Of course, the other chiefs didn't know this weird kid's background. Seeing his performance in the 7 Peaks tournament, they assumed that he knew the most basic sword-riding Taoist method. But they did not know Sha Danon had secretly learned incantations and reached the level of actuate. How would he know any sword incantations? Seeing the others wielding their swords, Kevern wielded the white ice sword, Lu Sweki wielded the blue, Aeolian firmament sword, Zhang Shushu wielded a purple sword. Xian Yuan. Sha Danon was nervous. He forced himself to use Fire Stick, but the feeling was a bit lacking. It was not as smooth as the day of 7 Peaks tournament. Going through the clouds and over the mountains, this journey should have taken half a day, but the 4 of them only arrived at Hyang City after sunset. To avoid suspicion, Sha Danon and the other 3 landed at a quiet place outside of Sunstream City. Their bodies were soaked, their faces pale. It seemed more difficult than the day of the tournament. Along the way, he lost his grip on the fire stick several times. If not for Kaheo and the rest who were by his side, could see that something was wrong and did not dare stay too far away from him, He was afraid that this newly recruited Jadian outstanding disciple would have fallen from the sky and died with his body smashed into pieces. Before he could bring glory to the sect, his name would be infamous for 10,000 years, and he would make Jadian lose all its face. Kevern and others decided to stop outside of the city and enter the city on foot. Although they wanted to avoid suspicion, they were also afraid Shah Danan would fall from the sky under the eyes of the crowd. The prestige that Jadian had built for 2,000 years would be destroyed. After a little rest, waiting for Shah Danan to catch his breath, the four of them walked toward the tall Sunstream city in the sunset. Shah Danan walked at the back. He could feel Kevern and Anan were looking at him with puzzlement. Clearly, they could not understand why a person who shines so brightly in Seven Peaks tournament could not even understand how to use the sword. Issa was still smiling and walking with Shah Danan. He did not mention anything about what just happened, but introduced Sunstream City to Shah Danan. Within a radius of 100 miles, this is the largest and most prosperous place. There are at least 200,000 or 300,000 people living in this city. The location is also good. There are a lot of merchants coming and going. It is very lively. Shah Danan was impressed by Issa's knowledge, said, "Shoo, how do you know everything?" Issa was proud, said, "That's nothing. I will know when I read more books." Then he smiled wickedly, whispered to Shah Danan's ear, "Actually, I've been here many times. I sneaked down the mountain." Chapter 56. Shah Danan was surprised, said, You. Zheng Shushu pursed his lips and said, "Look at how scared you are. What does it matter? Ever since I started learning the art of sword manipulation, I've naturally had to practice it frequently. I've been flying all the way here, and when I'm tired, I'll go down and take a stroll. What's so great about that?" Shah Danan was speechless. Listening to their conversation, Kevern smiled, turned to Lu Sweki, and said, "Lu Shimmy, it is getting late. We will stay here tonight and continue our journey tomorrow." Lu Sweki's face was as cold as ice, without the slightest expression, and only nodded lightly. After entering the city, in order to avoid trouble, they had already changed their Qing Yun sect disciple attire, so it did not arouse any suspicions. But Anan Sweki's beauty caused quite a commotion, causing many passers-by to stop and look. Shah Danan peeked at Anan. Though she was expressionless, her eyes flashed with anger. He couldn't help but worry for the passers-by. If Eolin Firmus is unsheathed, half of this ancient city will be destroyed. But Anan's self-restraint was much better than Shah Danan expected. Anan did not do anything until they entered a tavern called Shanghai Yuan. Kevern was the most experienced in the group. He was the leader of the four. He was also the one who arranged the accommodations. After that, they were arranged to stay in the best room in the back garden. This Shanghai garden was very big. There were 4 courtyards in the back garden. The 4 of them lived in the west garden. Each of them had a room. After resting for a while, Kevern called for everyone to eat at the restaurant in front. Shanghai Garden had its own restaurant located on the busiest street in Heong City, but in the VIP lounge on the 3rd floor, it was very quiet. There were less than 10 tables in the spacious hall, and right now, there were about 5 tables with guests eating at them. Kevern called the waiter over and ordered a few dishes. He seemed to be very familiar with this place, so he was most likely a regular. Shah Danan thought. He was born in a farmer's family. He had never been to such a luxurious place like Shanghai Yuan. When he passed by the 2nd floor, he saw the hall was magnificent. But when he got to the 3rd floor, he saw the carvings of dragons and phoenixes, mahogany beams, antique, completely different from the 2nd floor. Of course, he didn't know that when people reach a place of wealth, they would instead pursue status and taste. Even though some people liked splendor and luxury, in order to let others say that they were cultured, it was common for them to attach themselves to elegance. The 4 of them sat at a small table near the window. Zheng Shushu glanced at the decorations in the hall and said to Kevern, "Brother Chi, the price here is not cheap, right?" Kiheo smiled and said, "This is the best restaurant in Heong City. Naturally, it won't be cheap, but our Qingyun sect has a good reputation here. Their boss is eager for us to come. He won't charge us much." Zheng Shushu made an ah sound and nodded his head in agreement. After a while, the waiter brought a few plates of stir-fried dishes to the table. especially a plate of fresh stewed fish at the end. The fish's body was elongated, the front was round, the back was narrow, the body was dark brown, and it had 2 pairs of whiskers, thick and long. The most important part was the meat was white and smooth. The aroma was very appetizing. Shah Danan was always interested in cooking, but he had never seen this kind of fish before. He couldn't help but ask the waiter, "Waiter, what is this fish called, and how is it cooked?" The waiter chuckled and said, "Customer, you really have good taste. This clear braised dreaming fish is our Shanghai Garden's signature dish. It is fragrant and tender, fragrant and sweet. Within 100 miles of Heong City, it is very famous." Shah Danan swallowed his saliva, picked up the chopsticks, and put it into his mouth. He immediately closed his eyes and nodded. "Ah, the meat is really good, but it is cooked even better. The sweetness has added some sugar, ginger to remove the fishy smell. It has the flavor of fried onions. Must have used fresh onions. Ah, the rarest is the pepper, 5 spices. That's right, and sesame oil. The taste is so good. Amazing, amazing." His intoxicated look made Kevern and Issa dumbfounded. Even Anan also looked at him with a strange expression. But the waiter standing at the side was really impressed, loudly praised. "Customer is really an expert. You know what is good for you." Shah Danan noticed everyone's expression. His face blushed, quickly put down the chopsticks, but still asked, "May I ask, waiter, where does longfish come from?" Before the waiter could say anything, a woman's voice from the big table next door said, "This longfish is a special product of the Zhugo Mountains in the south. It's 1,000 li away from here. How could it be transported here? Aren't you lying?" Note 1. Everyone was surprised. They looked at that table and saw there were 8 people sitting there. 6 men in yellow clothes, 2 women. One of the women was wearing a light purple dress. Her face was covered by a light veil. Her face could not be seen clearly, but the exposed skin was snow white. The other woman was the one who spoke. She was not old, only about 16 or 17 years old. She was wearing a light green dress. Her face was beautiful, thin eyebrows, snow white skin, a pair of bright eyes were very lively, even compared to Anan. Shah Danan exclaimed, "Ah." After the woman said that, her eyes fell on Anan. It seemed she was also surprised by Anan's appearance. Women love beauty. Even Lu Sweki, who was usually as cold as ice, could not help but take a second look at that woman. The waiter smiled apologetically. "Customer is right. But you don't know, 100 years ago, longfish was unique to Zhugo Mountain in the south. But then Jadian's master Doyle Shun passed by Zhugo Mountain, purposely moved the longfish back, placed it in Jadian's Een River. Now it not only survived, but also became prosperous. We are all indebted to Qing Yun Hill's profound Taoist immortals. That's why we have this good fortune." As he spoke, his face revealed an expression of extreme reverence. Shah Danan and the other Jadian people were very happy. But the girl heard it, looked at the veiled woman, then sat back and snorted. After finishing the delicious dinner, Shah Danan and others returned to their house with satisfaction. Kevern said to them at the door of West Garden, "Tonight, everyone can rest here. Tomorrow morning, we will go to Kongsang Mountain." Shah Danan and Issa answered, but Anan did not say anything. She went back to her room and closed the door. Kevern was stunned for a moment, then smiled bitterly at the two. "Shitty, you should also rest early." Shah Danan looked at Kevern's handsome face. Under the setting sun, Kevern's spirit was not any less than usual. Instead, it was like he was out of this world. Shah Danan suddenly felt disheartened. He reluctantly greeted Issa, then ignored Kevern and went back to his room. Issa laughed, chatted with Kevern for a while. Then both of them went back to their rooms to rest. That night was the first time Shah Danan left Mount Jadian for 5 years. He tossed and turned, not knowing why he could not sleep well. When he finally managed to fall asleep in the middle of the night, he suddenly dreamed that he was covered in blood and stood in the middle of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. At the same time, an indescribable fanatical killing intent surged in the depths of his heart. It was as if the red blood in front of him was like sweet spring water, attracting him, enticing him, making him want to kill to obtain all of this. Shah Danon woke up from the dream. He sat up, panting. His body was soaked in sweat. After a while, his beating heart slowly calmed down. He sat in a daze in the dark for a long time. Unintentionally, he reached out his hand and touched the fire stick beside his pillow. A cold feeling enveloped him. This dream was very similar to the nightmares he had been having over the years. It was as if he had turned into another person. The bloodthirsty and vicious man in the dream made him feel fear. There was no sound, and the surroundings were pitch black. He crossed his legs, sat up straight in the darkness, took a deep breath, closed his eyes, put his hands together in front of him. The darkness was like a gentle woman, gently wrapped around his body. A layer of faint golden light was faintly emitted from his body. Reflecting the faint light, Shah Danon's face was covered with a layer of solemnity that he should not have. After a long time, the layer of golden light faded away. Shah Danon opened his eyes in the darkness. His heart was peaceful. Every time at this time, he especially missed the kind monk Posey. He did not feel sleepy anymore. He walked to the door, opened it, and walked out. The rooms next to him were all dark. Kevern and others must be asleep. Shanghai Court's back garden was built in a garden. There were 4 courtyards in the 4 directions. Shah Danon walked out from his west garden and came to the garden in the center of the garden. It was already late at night. Looking at the sky, stars filled the sky. A full moon hung on the edge of the sky. The night wind was gentle with a hint of fragrance. The path was winding and deep, leading to an unknown place. Beside the path, grass, shrubs, all kinds of flowers were blooming. Shah Danon's heart was confused. He walked down the path. The wind brushed against his face, bringing a hint of coolness. In such a quiet night, a young man was walking alone in the deep garden, reminiscing the past. Beside the road, a small flower was trembling in the night wind. There were crystal dewdrops on the pink-white petals. Shah Danon stopped and stared at it dumbfoundedly. There was a faint fragrance coming from it. Suddenly, a slender hand, like coming from the eternal darkness, with a kind of beauty, with the moon and stars in the sky, touched the flower, broke it off. At that moment, a boom sounded in Shah Danon's mind. It was like the moon had lost its light. The garden suddenly fell into darkness. He turned his head and looked at that direction with a little bit of hatred. A young girl in water-green dress stood there, like attracting the light from the sky. She gently put the flower in front of her nose and took a deep sniff. Note 1. Classics of Mountains and Seas, Book of Mountains, Zhugo Mountain, another 500 miles south, called Zhugo Mountain, no plants, many sand and stones. It is a mountain 100 miles wide, many sleeping fish. Chapter 57. Shah Danon startled. He recognized that person was the beautiful girl who argued about sleeping fish during dinner. She was still wearing the same green dress. Under the moonlight, her skin was like snow, extremely beautiful, like a fairy. The girl put the flower to her nose, took a deep breath. An intoxicated expression appeared on her face. It was a breathtaking beauty. In front of her beautiful face, the flowers seemed to be even more dazzling. But Shah Danon's heart was filled with an unknown anger. He frowned and said, "The flower was blooming nicely. Why did you break it?" The green dress girl's bright eyes looked at Shah Danon, said lightly, "I picked this flower. It is the fortune of this flower, being able to smell its fragrance. It is the fate of this flower's 3 lives. You are a common person. How could you know?" Shah Danon startled. It was the first time he heard such absurd thing. He shook his head. "The flower was broken by you. Even its life is gone. How could it be happy?" The green dress girl glanced at him, said, "You are not a flower. How do you know it will not be happy?" Shah Danon heard the unreasonable words of the girl. His heart was even angrier, said, "You are not a flower. How do you know it will be happy? Perhaps the flower is in pain right now. I'll look, there's water on the flower. Maybe it is crying because of the pain." The green dress girl was startled for a moment, then burst out laughing. Her laughter was like 100 flowers blooming, stunning Shah Danon. "Flowers' tears? Ha, flower tears. This is the first time I've heard a man called Dewdrops the tears of a flower. I'm dying of laughter." Shaw Dannon's face blushed, couldn't say anything. But seeing the girl was bent over from laughing, his face was burning. He forced himself to say, so what? Unexpectedly, when the girl heard this and looked at him, she laughed even louder. Her crisp laughter echoed in the quiet and dark garden, adding some warmth to the atmosphere. Shaw Dannon was not angry. He wanted to say something, but he did not know what to say. Looking at the girl's happy smile, he stomped his feet, turned, and left. He hadn't taken 2 steps when he suddenly heard the green-clothed girl behind him stop laughing. However, there was still a hint of a smile in her tone as she said, "Hey, wait a minute." Shaw Dannon was in a good mood when he came out tonight, but after meeting this woman, his mood became bad. Hearing her calling him, his heart was irritated. He turned back and said, "I'm not calling Hey. Who are you calling?" The girl startled. The smile on her face was taken away. Her eyes looking at Shaw Dannon became a bit colder. It seemed there were not many people who talked back to her like this. But after a moment, she seemed to have thought of something. Although she didn't recover her brilliant smile, her tone was still gentle as she said, "Oh, then what's your name?" Shaw Dannon blurted out, "My name is—" Then he stopped, snorted, said, "Why should I tell you?" The green-clothed girl's face turned serious, seemed a bit angry. But when she saw Shaw Dannon's angry expression, she was like a little boy in a fit of pique. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. This smile completely dissipated the gloomy expression on her face. Contrasted with the moonlight in the sky, the garden was filled with fragrance. This beautiful woman's face was full of smiles, as if she knew this was not very good. She shook her head and tried to hold it in, but she still laughed. It was like the innocence from long ago came back to life tonight. The moonlight was like water, gently shined on her shoulder and face, reflecting the breathtaking beauty. Shaw Dannon was mesmerized by her. The girl laughed for a while. When she found Shaw Dannon was staring at her, she snorted. She did not blush like a normal girl. Instead, she asked directly, "Am I pretty?" Shaw Dannon was surprised by her. Like a thief caught, he felt very embarrassed. But under the girl's soft eyes, there was no place to escape. You pretty?" Shaw Dannon was startled. A strange feeling rose in his heart. The girl didn't seem to care. A light smile appeared on her face, said, "I think so too. Since young, who didn't say I am pretty? You men are all the same." From her tone, young age, it seemed like she had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Shaw Dannon was about to refute, but when he looked at her, he saw her bright eyes and white teeth, standing alone in the moonlight, vaguely familiar. He immediately recalled the time on Ching Yun Hill, beside the Jade pool. He saw his senior sister's beautiful figure with his own eyes. At that moment, his interest suddenly waned, could no longer raise his spirits. Looked at the green-attired young lady again, quietly sighed, without saying a word, turned and left. "Hey!" After a few steps, he heard the voice behind him. Shaw Dannon frowned and turned around, looking at the green-clothed girl. She narrowed her eyes, her lips tightened, like she was thinking of something. But the atmosphere suddenly became silent. "What is your name?" She still asked like this. His figure was reflected in her eyes. Shaw Dannon suddenly flinched. His anger disappeared instantly. It was like he shouldn't be angry at this figure. He avoided the soft eyes. With his uneasy timidity, said, "Shaw Dannon." Then, he quickly walked back, looking a little like he was fleeing for his life. He lowered his head and walked with large strides. Just as he reached a corner of the winding path, he suddenly saw a black figure appear in front of him. In this dark garden, if he didn't come close, it would be really hard to notice. He almost couldn't stop himself. Luckily, his body's reaction was fast and stopped right in front of that person. In the darkness, a pair of bright but quiet eyes appeared in front of him. The distance between them was too close. Shaw Dannon was surprised and quickly took a step back. Then he saw that person was the masked woman who sat next to the green-clothed girl during dinner. She was still wearing a veil, but she had changed into a black silk dress. In this night, she was almost like a ghost. Shaw Dannon calmed himself down. He was still panting. He could smell a faint fragrance. Not sure if it was the fragrance of the garden or the fragrance when he was near the woman. His heart jumped. He felt it was a mistake to come out tonight. He vaguely said, "Sorry." Then he walked past the masked woman and went back to his own place. From the beginning to the end, the masked woman didn't say a word. She just stood there quietly, watching this young man. When Shah Danon walked past her, she slowly turned around and watched his leaving figure. After a long time, when her figure almost blended into the darkness of the garden, she turned around and walked deeper into the garden. Soon, she saw the green-clothed girl was still standing there, playing with a broken flower in her hand. The green-clothed girl raised her head. She was not surprised, smiled. "Aunt Negar, you are back." The masked woman looked at the flower in her hand. Her veil moved slightly. It seemed like she nodded, said, "Those 4 people are from Jade." Her voice reverberated in the garden, deep and serene. Although it was soft, it carried a hint of ghostly aura. "The leader is Dragonhead Peak's Kevern. I have never seen the other 3 before. Seems like they are of the younger generation." The green-clothed girl smiled, said, "I know one. The person who just passed by is called Shah Danon. Such a lame name." The masked woman looked at her, said lightly, "Bailu, long time no see, you appreciate flowers." The green-clothed girl, who was called Bailu, startled. The next moment, her beautiful face showed a smile again, said, "Yes, Aunt Negar, long time no see." She picked up the flower and looked at it carefully. Then, under the gaze of the masked woman, the green-clothed girl, with a smile on her face, decisively crushed the beautiful flower into powder. The next day, the 4 people of Jadian got up. After washing up, Kevern gathered them together and discussed, "Kongsang Mountain is 3,000 miles away from the east. It is not close. We should hurry." The other 3 did not have any objection, so they paid the bill and departed. The boss of Shanghai Yuan really admired Qingyan sect. The originally expensive room was actually given a 50% discount, almost like an ordinary room. Shah Danon looked at Kevern and the owner talking and laughing. His eyes looked around, but until he left, he did not see the green-clothed girl and her people again. The 4 of them flew in the air. This 3,000 miles journey took them 10 days. During this time, Shah Danon dragged them down a lot. But after a few days, Shah Danon's cultivation became more familiar with the fire stick. He was able to fly properly. Every day, when he was flying in the sky, the feeling of flying through the blue sky and white clouds made him excited for several days. Chapter 58. On this day, they finally arrived at Kongsang Mountain. Everyone descended from the clouds and were all shocked. Within a circumference of 100 li, there was a steep and towering mountain, but there were many rocks and few plants. There was no sign of human habitation at the foot of the mountain. It was desolate. It was almost dusk. The sun was sinking in the west. The yellow sunset shined on Kongsang Mountain, bringing a bit of desolation and terror. They landed at the foot of the mountain and retrieved their esper. Kevern looked at the sky, said, "I don't think there is any place to stay here. Why don't we go up the mountain now, search for Cave of Fangs, and see if there is a suitable place to rest for the night?" Issa nodded. "Chi Shi Xiang is right. Let's go up the mountain now." Shah Danon did not have any objection since Issa agreed. Anan looked at the sky, did not say anything, but she was the first to go to the top of the mountain. Kongsang Mountain was not as high as Jadian's Peak of Widows, but it was not low either. Plus it was remote and steep. There was no way to find it. The 4 of them went up from the foot of the mountain. When they reached the middle of the mountain, the sky was already dark. As the 4 of them walked to a platform, Chi Hao called out to them and took out a small bronze mirror from his bosom. The 3 of them immediately recognized that it was the Green Cloud sect's treasure, the Union Mirror. For a moment, they were stunned and did not know what Chi Hao was going to do. Kevern held the Union Mirror in his hand and chanted a few incantations. The originally dim Union Mirror seemed to sense something and gradually brightened up. It floated up from Kevern's hand and stopped 2 feet above his head. The light became brighter and brighter, with a pale yellow glow, lit up a circle 6 feet around the 4 of them, protecting them in the center. Kevern said, 800 years ago, Kongsang Mountain was the gathering place of Falcon heretics. I see this mountain is desolate and strange. I'm afraid there are a lot of mountain spirits. Union Mirror can protect its owner, so we can prepare for it. Shah Danon looked at the Union Mirror floating in the air. The small mirror's appearance was not amazing, but there was auspicious energy in it. It should not be underestimated. At this moment, everyone suddenly heard a loud noise in the distance, followed by a crackling sound. The sound gradually became denser, and in the end, not only did it become louder and louder, even the rhythm could not be heard clearly. Only the loud, rumbling noise reverberated in this barren mountain. In the distance, relying on the little light emitted by the six harmonies mirror in the darkness, everyone was shocked to see that behind the distant mountain, a black cloud suddenly soared up, appearing even more strange in this darkness, and the loud, rumbling sound came from there. Everyone's expression changed. Zhang Shushu rolled his eyes and suddenly cried out, "Six Union Mirror!" As soon as he spoke, before anyone could react, the black cloud in the sky seemed to have sensed something and moved towards them. A moment later, an ear-piercing whistle seemed to come from the black cloud. In an instant, the black cloud turned and pounced towards the four of them, the only light in the dark night. In an instant, the starry night sky turned pitch black, as if it was covered by something. They could smell the stench filled their surroundings. Shah Danon and others were shocked. Only Kevin was still calm, but his face was pale. He quickly said, "Do not move. Do not leave the range of Union Mirror." After another moment, the whistling and rumbling sound were already right beside their ears. Under the light of the Six Harmonies mirror, everyone finally saw the black cloud clearly. It was actually countless black bats, densely packed together. Moreover, looking at their figures, they were more than twice the size of the bats they had seen in the past. Every single one of them had their mouths wide open. Amidst their black bodies, their mouths were scarlet red, looking ferocious and terrifying. But the pale yellow light from Union Mirror showed its effect. All the bats were blocked outside of the light circle. No matter how they hit and squeezed, the light circle did not budge. On the contrary, the bat that came into contact with the pale yellow light emitted a sizzling sound from its black body. After a while, it fell to the ground and struggled endlessly. It seemed that it would not be able to survive. But there were too many of these bats. Even the stars in the sky were covered by them. There were at least millions of them. Those who died on the ground were probably not even one in a million of them. Countless bats rushed forward wave after wave, surrounding the four of them in the middle. Although they were safe for the time being, there were terrifying, bloody mouths all around them, and the stench almost made them want to vomit. But Union Mirror was a Taoist treasure. Under the attack of countless of ferocious beasts, it did not show any sign of weakness. The yellow light circle seemed thin, but it stood like a mountain. After a while, the bodies of the bats piled higher and higher around the light circle. At this moment, there were countless of black bats surrounding the light circle. It was not 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. It was more like 300 layers inside and 300 layers outside. But the bats seemed to slow down their attack on the light circle. It seemed like they knew it was useless, so they did not continue to do useless things. But it seemed like these bats could not give up the delicious food. They still surrounded the light circle and refused to leave. Shah Danon's heart was shaken. He had never seen such ferocious beasts in his life. Even now, he was still nervous and afraid. He took back his eyes from the bats and saw Ainan's face was also extremely pale. At the same time, Ainan also felt his eyes and looked at Shah Danon. Their eyes met in the air. Ainan suddenly turned her head. Her pale face became even paler, but she did not turn her head back. Whoosh! Suddenly, all of the bats flapped their wings and flew up. Issa looked at them, then let out a sigh of relief, said, "So difficult dash," before he could finish his sentence. He could not continue. The sky was filled with black clouds. Countless bats flew to high altitudes and suddenly turned around. The ones in front rushed down like hailstones and hit the halo of the Six Union Mirror. However, they were bounced back by the halo of the Six Union Mirror. Then, a mist of blood rose up, and under the pale yellow light, they fell to the ground in pieces. Dirty blood flowed everywhere. Countless of horrifying blood flowers appeared in the night, then fell to the ground. But the bats that came later seemed indifferent to the death of their own kind, still hit on the light circle. The four Jadians' faces were pale, looking at this rare, ferocious beast. Around the light circle, soon, almost half a person's height of a thick pile of bat corpses was piled up. Shah Danan suddenly found that the back of his shirt was soaked with cold sweat. No one knew how long this terrifying scene lasted. When the corpses of the bats outside the circle of light had piled up to the height of a person, the swarm of bats finally stopped their ferocious attack. At this moment, even the light from the Six Harmonies' treasured mirror had dimmed a little. However, it still flickered in the dark night and stood tall. The black clouds surrounded the only light in the night, still not willing to leave. The four of them did not dare to close their eyes. Each of their hands held their own esper, did not dare to slack off. But the bats did not seem to have any good method. They just surrounded the light circle, not willing to leave, but did not launch any attack. This continued until dawn. When the first ray of sunlight shone on the horizon, it was as if something was calling out to them. All of the bats suddenly flew up and circled in the air for a moment before flying back to the place they had flown out from last night. They came quickly and left even faster. In just a moment, the countless bats had disappeared. The four Jadian slowly relaxed. But after a long time, when Kevern was sure the bats will not come out again, he removed the union mirror. The light circle disappeared. With a muffled sound, the mountain of bat corpses around the four of them suddenly collapsed from all directions, drowning the four of them in this disgusting and terrifying river. At that moment, Shah Danan's heart jumped. He thought he'd stopped breathing. At the same time, he heard a scream from the person next to him. A jade hand reached out and grabbed his arm tightly. The strength was so strong that the fingernails dug into his flesh through his clothes. This pain drilled into his heart. He turned around and looked at the frightened and beautiful woman. Her pale face had a trace of panic in the morning sun, causing an inexplicable pain in his heart. Suddenly, all the fear in his heart disappeared, even though he was still a little nervous. But his attention was attracted by Anan, as if in front of her, he could not cower. He took a step forward and stood in front of her. Anan's breathing slowly calmed down. She lifted her head, her lips moved, looked deeply at Shah Danan's face, then let go of her hand. Chapter 59. The four of them finally walked out from the pile of bat corpses. They were in a very sorry state. Not only their bodies were covered with dirty blood, the smell was also very disgusting. The four of them were Jadian's people. They were always clean, especially Anan from Bamboo Height. She loved cleanliness. This situation was even worse than cutting her 3 times. The four of them quickly walked away. They just wanted to get as far away from the disgusting bat corpses as possible. After walking a long distance in one breath, they came to a relatively flat rock. The four of them patted their clothes and tidied them up for a long time. They only brushed off some miscellaneous items. However, the traces of bat blood and the stench could not be washed away no matter what. Shah Danan and the other men were better, but Anan's usually cold face was like snow. She wiped her clothes fiercely, rubbed it hard. It seemed like she would not stop until she got rid of those disgusting things from her body. But the blood seemed to be very sticky. Soon, Kevern, Issa, and Shah Danan gave up. Only Anan still refused to give up with a pale face. The 3 men looked at each other. Even the most experienced Kevern was a little embarrassed. He did not know what to say. Just when the 4 of them were silent, only Lou Sweki was frowning and rubbing his clothes. Suddenly a few whistling sounds came from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw 4 flashes of light in the sky. 2 yellow, 1 white, and 1 green. A moment later, the 4 lights landed in front of them. After a flash, 4 figures appeared. The 2 people on the left were actually 2 monks. The one at the back was tall, with thick eyebrows and huge eyes. His face was fierce, and he exuded an imposing aura even without being angry. If it wasn't for the fact that he was wearing a kasaya, people would probably think that he was a bandit blocking the road and robbing people. However, the other monk standing in front of him was a young monk who was a head shorter than him. He was completely different from him. His skin was fair, his eyes were bright, and he wore a moon-white kasaya. He looked thin and weak, but no matter what, he did not look down on him. The two people on the right were a young man and a young woman. The man was handsome, and the woman was beautiful. They looked like a perfect match when they stood together, like a golden boy and jade girl in front of an immortal throne. The four of them looked at the four from Chinyan's sect. Seeing the blood stains on them, they all frowned. The young and clean monk first chanted the name of Buddha and said, Umitba, may I ask if the four benefactors are from Chinyan's sect? The four looked at each other. Kevern stepped out, returned the greeting, said, Yes, I am Kevern. May I ask who you are? The young monk smiled. I am Skysong Temple's Fazan. This is shitty fashion. The other two are Incense's outstanding disciples, Li Su and Yannin. The tall fashion even greeted in a low muffled voice, but that Fun Xiang Valley Li Su and Yan Hong both had haughty expressions, nodded slightly as a form of greeting. Kevern frowned. He ignored the two from Incense and said to Fazan, I have long heard of Skysong Temple's Fazan Shixiao. You are praised as a rare talent by the righteous cultivators. Today I can see you. You are really outstanding. Fa Xiang smiled and said, Chi Senior Brother is really overpraising me. My aptitude is dull. Only my teacher Pu Hong did not abandon me and taught me true skills, hoping to do some good deed for the common people in the world, but I dare not to be compared with Qin Yun's sect senior brothers. Kevern laughed, waved his hand. Fazan Shixiang is too humble. Come, let me introduce my shitty and shimmy. Then he introduced Sha Danan and others to them. Sha Danan followed their greeting. But when Kevern introduced him, he felt Fazan's eyes brightened and took another look at him. Right now, Fun Xiang Valley Li Sun, who had been ignored since the beginning of the conversation, his expression was not good. After Kaheo finished his introduction, he suddenly coldly said, Chi Senior Brother, your Qingyun sect has always been the leader of the good faction, Taoist true way unparalleled in the world. Why is it that after seeing you today, all of you are in such a sorry state? The four Jadian people's face changed. Sha Danan was disgusted by his arrogant attitude. He saw Anan had stopped wiping her clothes. Her face was frosty, coldly looking at the two Incense Valley people, but most of her eyes were looking at the beautiful girl named Yannin. Kevern was, after all, experienced in the ways of the world. Even though he was a little angry, he quickly recovered. He laughed and said, I won't hide it from you all. Last night, I came here with 3 people from my sect to search for the Cave of Fangs. Unexpectedly, we ran into countless bats. When Fa Xiang and the other 3 heard this, their expressions changed. The tall and strong Fa Shan widened his eyes. With a rough voice he said, that is the countless beasts in the Cave of Thousand Fangs, savage and cruel, very difficult to deal with. Kevern was quick-witted. Hearing this, he knew that the 4 people in front of him had arrived a few days earlier and also met with these troublesome fellows. His thoughts turned quickly, but suddenly he heard Zheng Shushu's laughter coming from behind. He walked forward and smiled at Fashion. Fashion Senior Brother, so you guys have also met with these bats? Fashion nodded, seemed like he was a straightforward person, said, Yes, there were too many of those bats. We had to retreat. Zheng Shushu sighed and said, I won't hide it from everyone. Last night, we also encountered those bats. Originally, we wanted to help the people get rid of the evil. Unexpectedly, from morning till night, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't kill them. In the end, we could only drive these vicious creatures back to the cave, but we ended up with a body full of filth. AI, ashamed. He turned to Kevern. They smiled at each other, said at the same time, Shame. Everyone's face changed. Incense's Li Su snorted. His face was filled with disdain. Yannin was a little shy, but her face also showed disbelief. Skysong Temple's Fazan smiled, but did not say anything. Fashion's face was filled with admiration. Sha Danan was startled, looked at the 2 people who were smiling brightly. After a moment, Fazan smiled. This Kongsang Mountain matter, our 3 faction elders wanted us young generation to gain some experience. Now everyone is here. But Jade and Shixiang must have had a hard time coming here. Why don't we rest for a day first? Tomorrow morning, we will enter the Cave of Fangs. At this moment, Li Sun, who was standing at the side, snorted coldly, said, Fa Xiang Senior Brother is right, or else after we go in, there will be people looking for excuses. Except for Shadanan, Kevern, Issa, and Anan were all from Jadian. All of them were loved by their masters. All of them had pride in their bones. Kevern snorted, Li Su Shi Xiang is right. Otherwise, with my tired body, if I still need to save you, I won't be able to do anything. Li Sun clearly did not expect the Qing Yun sect disciples to be so arrogant. He was born in Funxiang Valley. Since young, he was valued by his teacher, practicing Taoist skills among his peers, other than a few. All of them were far better than his peers of the same generation, and thus developed his arrogant character. How could he endure this? His face immediately changed, stared at Keheo, and said, In that case, Qi Shixiang's practice is far better than mine. I would like to ask for advice. This matter concerned his sect's face. Keheo straightened his body and was about to walk out, when suddenly Anan suddenly walked out from behind, stood in the middle of the field, coldly said, No need to trouble Chiheri Shixiang to fight. Let me experience Funxiang Valley's immortal skills. Li Sun was stunned. Although Anan was covered in blood, but her face was still as white as snow. Although her expression was cold, in the awe-inspiring, but there was an elegant beauty that looked down on all living beings. He had never seen such beauty before. He was startled for a moment. At the same time, Tianyin Temple Fashang walked out, smiled, and said, Various senior brothers, we are here to investigate the remaining evil sect members. Before we left, I believe the various teachers and seniors have already instructed us. If they know that we are acting on impulse here, I'm afraid we will be punished when we return. Moreover, it is just a small matter. Let's all take a step back. What do you say? Li Su came back to himself, snorted, looked at the sky. Although he did not say anything, his meaning was quite clear. Kevern was thinking of Reverend Daoxian's instructions before he left and felt some regret. He took the opportunity to step down from the stage and called out from behind, Lu Jr. sister, Fa Xiang senior brother is right. Let's make peace. Anan looked at everyone, snorted, then walked back. She saw Sha Danan was looking at her. She glanced at Sha Danan's face, then walked to the side. Chapter 60. Sha Danan was stared at by her, his heart chilled. An indescribable feeling rose in his heart. Fazan said, If so, we will go down the mountain first. Tomorrow morning, we will go up the mountain to investigate. At this time, no one had any objections, so Fa Xiang led the way. Everyone followed him on the flying sword and came to a small hill about 30 miles away from Kongsang Mountain. There was actually a spring here. It was what the Qing Yun sect people needed. They washed up next to the spring, found a quiet place to change their clothes, then came out to meet Fazan and others. Lu Sweki was a female. It was not very convenient. The place to change was also the furthest, so she was the last one to come out. Everyone looked. After she had freshened up, she looked radiant, added a few points of charm to her original elegance. Immediately their eyes brightened. Not to mention Zheng Shu, Li Sun, and the rest's eyes brightened. Even that Funxiang Valley Yanhong, who had been silent, also looked at her a few more times. The 8 most excellent disciples of the 3 main factions sat around and discussed. Sha Danan learned from Fazan and others that the bats in Cave of Fangs in Kongsang Mountain were the mutated species raised by the falcon. They were cruel, blood-sucking. They were the accomplices of the falcon. 800 years ago, after the falcon's base was destroyed, there were still a few bats left. After a long time, they multiplied and grew to the large scale today. Every time they went out to hunt, there was no one left within 500 miles radius. But those bats seemed to be afraid of sunlight, so they only moved at night. They stayed in Cave of Fangs during the day. Last night, the Jadian encountered them by chance. If they went up the mountain during the day, they would be fine. Issa frowned, asked Fazan, Fazan Shixiang, since those animals are in Cave of Fangs, how are we going to investigate? Fazan hesitated, said, According to my observation, those animals are only hanging upside down on the roof of the cave during the day. They did not move. Maybe we can go in. Issa was speechless. Sha Danan could not help but said, That means Fazan Shixiang, you are not sure. Maybe those guys will attack us when they see us enter the cave. Then what should we do? Fa Xiang looked at him. There seemed to be an indistinct glint in his eyes, but his demeanor was still gentle. Said, Exactly so. Actually, I don't have 100% confidence, but since it's an order from the sect, I have to do it. Why don't we give it a try? At worst, we can just leave. Today me, Fashion Junior Brother, and the two Funxiang Valley patrons originally wanted to go in and investigate. Did not expect to meet all of you. This is also good. The more people there are, the easier it is to look after each other. Humph! It was Li Sun who snorted again. The 14 Yun sect disciples looked at him at the same time. Li Sun was not afraid at all. Only when he saw Lu Sueki's eyes looking over, his expression changed slightly. Kevin ignored him, turned to F.A. Xiang and said, "There is one more thing I would like to ask F.A. Xiang Shi Xiang." F.A. Xiang said, "Senior Brother Qi, please speak." Kevin said, 3 months ago, our Jadian head disciple, Xiao Yikai Xiao Shi Xiang, has already arrived here. Do you know where he is now? F.A. Xiang shook his head and said, "We came here with Funxiang Valley too, and have not seen Xiao Senior Brother." Kevin frowned, pondered, and did not say anything. The next day, the sun rose. Sha Danan and the others arrived at Kongsing Mountain. The mountain was barren, sand and stones covered the ground. On such a large mountain, not even the sound of birds could be heard. They must have become the desert of the vicious bats, or already moved away from this mountain. Fazan and the others arrived several days earlier. They already found the location of Cave of Fangs. They followed carefully and finally arrived at the entrance of Cave of Fangs. It was a large cave located at the back of the mountain, slightly sloping downward. Only the entrance had a little light. Further inside, it was pitch black. Standing at a place about 5 or 6 yards away from the entrance, they could feel the chilly wind blowing out from the cave, brushing past their faces. At the same time, there was a rustling sound, like whispering, like ghosts crying, making their heart numb. Kevin looked at the cave a few more times, then turned his head and forced a smile, said, "So, let us go in." Everyone was silent. Fezan nodded. "That's right. But the danger inside the cave is unpredictable. Everyone better prepare your esper, just in case." Since it was a matter of life and death, no one dared to be careless. They all held their esper in their hands. When Li Su, Yanin, and the two Sky Song monks saw Sha Danan took out a black fire stick, they were stunned, surprised. Just when they were about to enter the cave, the chilly wind was getting closer to Sha Danan. Sha Danan felt it and smiled at him. Fezan smiled back, said quietly, "Zhang Shidi, the road ahead is dangerous. You better follow behind me." When they were about to enter the cave, the wind became colder and colder. Fezan approached Sha Danan. Sha Danan felt it and smiled at him. Fezan smiled back, whispered, "Zhang Shidi, the road ahead is dangerous. You can follow behind me." Just when they were about to enter the cave, the chilly wind became more and more chilly. Fezan got close to Sha Danan. Sha Danan felt it and smiled at him. Fezan smiled back, said quietly, "Zhang Shidi, the road ahead is dangerous. You better follow behind me." Just stepped into the cave. After a few steps, Sha Danan felt his feet softened. His whole body was sinking. He was shocked, but fortunately, it only sank to his ankles before stopping. At this moment, everyone was already in the darkness, but their respective magic treasures and immortal artifacts were activated, and they emitted rays of light. Zhang Xiaofan looked down at his feet, and his expression instantly became bitter. It turned out that he was actually stepping on extremely thick bat feces. Not to mention the stench, his feet were even stuck in it, and the feeling was as uncomfortable as it could be. He looked up and saw that most of the others had the same expression, especially the two ladies, Lu Sueki and Funxiang Valley Yanhong, frowned tightly, their faces pale. Sha Danan shook his head, forced himself to calm down. After they had familiarized themselves with the environment, they continued to walk inside. At this moment, the whispering sound became louder, like it was far away, but also like it was right next to them, front, back, left, right, everywhere. After walking for another 3 to 4 zhang, Kevern, who was at the front, suddenly said in a low voice, "Wait." Everyone immediately stopped. Kevern's frozen immortal sword slowly rose up. Its light became brighter and brighter, illuminating the cave. Everyone held their breath. This was an extremely large cave, and the top of the cave was extremely high above the ground. Under the illumination of the ice frost immortal sword's white light, everyone was astonished to see that there were countless black bats hanging upside down at the top of the cave. It was almost impossible to see the rocks of the cave, and the rustling sound was caused by the animals rubbing against each other. In the darkness, the bats that were illuminated by the white light seemed to feel uneasy. They began to move, but they did not fly. Instead, they used their claws to climb on the rocks and moved toward the darkness. Some even clawed on their own kind. Those fanged mouths that looked even more terrifying in the darkness were frightening. They did not dare to breathe. After a moment, they found, although the light was very bright in the darkness, the bats did not move and will not attack. After discovering that, they were relieved. Fazan said in a low voice, "Luckily, little monk's judgment is correct. Everyone, let us continue." Everyone turn around, once again heading towards the depths of this terrifying ancient cave, toward the other side of the darkness that was even deeper. Following everyone's footsteps, the bat feces beneath their feet became thicker and thicker. And under the illumination of the ice immortal sword's white light, the bats at the top of the cave seemed to be endless. More and more of them appeared, their fangs sharp, muttering low cries, all of them whistling around them. If not for the fact that the 8 of them had righteous esper, their mind was firm, normal people would be mad. After walking for a long time, Shah Danan was walking in the middle of the group. Fezin was still walking in front of him. Looking at the white robe of the young monk, Shah Danan suddenly remembered Posey. The person in his memory, is he from the same place as the monk in front of him? In front of them, Kevern suddenly shouted, "Ah!" Before Shah Danan realized, he felt something was wrong under his feet. It was like he had stepped on hard ground. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.